Rachel, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Lenny. I am honored to be here.
I'm honored to have you here. I was going to start with a different question, but we were chatting ahead of this conversation, and I always like to ask guests, what do you want people to get out of this conversation? And I loved your answer. So I just want you to share this. So let me just ask you, what are you hoping people get out of the conversation we're about to have?
Genuinely, I hope that your listeners take away that the human side of business building is incredibly fun and impactful, and that it's easy to do. They can do it with simple tools. So I'm hopeful that through this conversation, heads of product, heads of engineering, founders walk away feeling more empowered and more motivated to attune to the people around them.
So what I'm hearing is just if you're struggling with the human side of building a product, building a team, building a company, there are answers. You can do it.
Yes, exactly. It is achievable and it's actually most natural. Leaders want to care about the people they work with. They want to empower those around them, but sometimes the busyness of our world gets in the way and the urgency of the litany of things to do distracts you from the people in front of you. And actually, if you really understand the talent around you and you create an environment where they can be successful, your business will thrive.
I think the hardest part of this for people is just, there's like the knowing this can be helped with. The other is just being vulnerable enough to seek help and to take this on because it's so hard. Just like, maybe I'm not a great manager. That doesn't feel good.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's vulnerable to seek help, but I think your audience, I know to be incredibly committed to growth. I hear of people who come on your podcast and they've spent decades focused on self-improvement. And I actually want to tell you a story about one of my clients who loves your podcast. And I was talking to him last week. He's a client I've seen for 10 years. Wow. And he's a person who exemplifies a commitment to personal growth. I started working with him when he was a frontline engineering manager at Coinbase. And we talked about who he is, what his strengths are, and his bigger picture why. And he talked about this dream of creating a global movement one day. He was really focused on building community. And he thought the path for creating possibility in the world around him was creating a strong community around him. And he continually worked on his leadership capacity. And over the 10 years, at some point, he created a tattoo on his arm that's a sun with a redwood grove around it that reminded him of his core strengths and his purpose. And today, guess what he's doing, Lenny?
Killing it.
He's not only killing it, but he's
vision.
Running a community, a global community for Coinbase called Base and the Base app.
Oh, wow.
It's the largest Ethereum L2 in the world. And it's a community of creators and developers. And he's having a great time. Like he's having more fun than ever. And so I think for the people who are committed to excellence and impact, recognizing that if they lean into their gifts and they get back into their purpose, they can have more fun while having an impact on the world.
This story reminds me of just why I love these sorts of conversations, because the sort of stuff we're going to be talking about, and we'll get into it right after this final preamble, is stuff that's usually locked away in these very small rooms, are only accessible to folks with a bunch of money. You know, this is stuff people pay tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars for over the course of their career. And I just love the idea of sharing all this with everyone to help them all learn from the stuff that you've learned from all these people you've worked with. So I'm really excited to be digging into stuff. The first thing I want to dive into, I actually asked you, when clients come to you, what is the biggest gap they have that is keeping them from being successful as leaders? And you told me it's essentially knowing when to coach versus knowing when to just tell people what to do and learning to coach. Talk about what you see there, why this is so important, and how you help people develop the skill.
I think that most leaders, especially technical leaders, assume they have to have all the answers. People have climbed the ladder in whatever realm they're in because they've been dependable, reliable, the smartest person in the room. But when you're leading a quickly scaling company, you quickly have less context than the people you're around. And the way you were operating before doesn't work because you don't have the ability to wrap your arms around every problem in a deep way. So I've seen leaders at every phase, from frontline managers up to running an 8,000 person company, struggle with knowing, when do I have to have the answer? And when I don't have the answer, what options do I have? But great leaders know that when you try to advise and have the answer all the time, you're not actually equipping your team to go solve the hard problems. You're training your team to come to you with all of the hard problems. And coaching is a different way. It's an alternative path that unlocks brilliance in your team and is way more motivating for the people around you. So coaching is actually a learnable skill, obviously, because there's tons of coaches around Silicon Valley, but you don't have to coach in the same way that an executive coaches. You can shift your energy into curiosity when someone brings you a hard problem to solve, and create space to get curious and help them solve their own problem. So obviously, sometimes advising is the right path. If there's an urgent issue, the person coming to you doesn't have the skill they need, that's a time to advise and help. But leaders over-rotate, assuming the people that they've hired, who are experts in their domain, need them to solve the problem. So I think it's useful for your listeners to actually know that coaching's an alternative, and I can help them learn some basic skills around this.
Okay, I'd love to learn those skills. What this makes me think about is there's this famous Harvard Business Review piece, I don't know, it's like 30 years ago maybe, about the monkey on the back. Do you know this piece?
Say more.
Okay, we'll link to it. It's this idea that as a leader, people always just coming to you, trying to give you their monkey that's sitting on their back. And they're like, hey, this monkey's causing me all this problem. I don't know what to do. But this monkey, here you go. You take it and feed it and help it figure out what it needs. And the role of a leader is to keep the monkey on the back of the person and help them figure out how to solve the problem. Exactly what you're describing.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. I love that. I think leaders make things up when they don't have answers sometimes. A person comes to you with a problem and you just want to help. But the best way to help is actually doing something that most leaders don't do well. It's attuning to, what is the context? What does this person need? What are they blocked on? And ask them with those questions so that they can solve their own problem.
So let's talk about how to get better at this. But first of all, when you said, when is it actually smart to just tell them what to do? You said it's when they don't have the skills to do it. Is there any other kind of heuristics of like, okay, just tell them what to do in these cases?
Yeah, it's an urgent issue and you actually have an answer that you want to drive. So don't coach and make it a game. Like, you want your person on your team to guess what's in your mind. That's not a good time to coach. You have something you absolutely want them to do. You know the right answer. You want them to be motivated to go do it. Advise them. Help them see the path. But most leaders over-index on that solution. So I want to share, maybe Lenny, I can teach you 2 skills that I think are the basics of leader coaching that you can use in your own life tonight with your wife or anyone you operate with. And hopefully your listeners can use them too.
Let's do it.
Okay, so the first skill is active listening. And Lenny, you're probably a good listener because this is what you do for a living, is you listen to the people who come on your podcast. But I don't know if you've seen Fight Club. There's a quote, most people aren't listening. They're just waiting for their turn to talk. This is rampant in tech. And great leaders flip that script and tune in. They're the kinds of leaders who walk into a room and they can see the elephants. They can name them. They can ask the hard questions to get people collaborating. So there's actually 3 levels to listening. So the first level of listening, level 1, is internal. Let's say you're talking to me about a problem. I'm thinking about the implications of that problem on me. I'm completely distracted with my own inner dialogue. That's level 1. Most people go through their world rushed and in level 1. Level 2 listening is focused. So you're talking to me and I can repeat back what you're saying. So I am listening to the words you're describing. And that's typically what happens in a good one-on-one. We're problem solving together. I'm focused on your words. Level 3 listening is global listening. So that's when I'm hearing beneath the words. I'm hearing what you're communicating, not just what you're saying. I see your body language. I notice your tone of voice. I know the context around what you're talking about. And I can reflect back more insight about what's happening than you're aware of because I'm understanding everything you're communicating. So dropping into level 3 listening is what great leaders do when they're influencing, when they're selling, when they're pitching a vision, and definitely when they're coaching. So do you want to try it?
Let's do it.
Okay, how about this? I'll demonstrate some level 3 listening. I'm going to ask you a question.
Okay. Uh-oh.
You told me earlier you're a father.
Yeah.
What is it like to be a dad?
Wow. What is it like to be a dad? It's amazing. It's like the most amazing thing I've ever done in many ways. I love it so much. It's also quite challenging at times, dealing with setting boundaries and knowing when to just let him do the thing he's really excited about, or just saying no and just letting him cry for a while. That's something I've been dealing with recently. But it's like everything people tell you it is, and it basically in every way, except the joy is so much higher than you hear from other people, because people always talk about all the downsides, all the pain and challenges.
Yeah, and I see you when you talk about being a father. Initially, I saw you really squirm in your chair. Like, whoa, this is a big question. And, you looked up and down and kind of avoided my eye contact at first, because my sense is you love being a dad and it's so challenging. It's so tiring. And I'm hearing both of that in your answer, like the high joy and the discomfort in having to sleep train and having to disappoint and navigating challenging behavior.
Nailed it. That was very nice to hear. Clearly you listened to everything I said, and that was a really good example of active listening.
What does it feel like to be seen that way?
It feels really nice. It feels really nice to be heard, and it's not just like you're repeating back my words. It's here's what I got out of like kind of the level below what you're saying and the gist and the bigger picture.
Yeah, there's some emotional connection when you listen actively. And that took, less than a minute. So what I want to invite listeners to understand is that active listening doesn't mean you're setting up an hour coaching session with every person on your team. No one has time for that. But even in the time you're already spending, just focusing on the other person in a way that is novel and really gives them your full attention so you can see their feelings under what they're saying goes a long way to motivating your team and helping them understand what's actually happening under the surface in this situation.
And I think there's just so much power in just in different words, repeating back what they said. That's almost implied in what you're describing. Like it sounds like, so, I don't know, like a trick they'll see through, but knowing that you're listening to me and you're going to show me active listening, it still feels really nice to just hear back what I said. There's a lot of power in that. And it's subtle.
Beautiful. Great. Yeah, there's an element of synthesizing what I'm hearing verbally. That's the focused listening part. And then mirroring back the emotions that I'm noticing.
The emotions.
And even things that I'm guessing. And I can say, is that right? And you can say, no, actually, I'm not conflicted about the challenges of being a dad. I just am so joyful. And then now I understand where you're coming from, and so do you.
Awesome. Okay, so this is a core skill of coaching is active listening.
Yes, so that's listening. Second skill, powerful questions. So asking powerful questions means I'm curious about what's really going on, and there's not one right answer. So a powerful question helps you gain insight, and it takes you to a new solution set you didn't have before. But it's not me leading the witness. I'm not trying to guide you to a specific answer. That wouldn't be a powerful question. So something that I like to equip leaders with is 4 kinds of questions that you can ask to unlock insight. So the first kind is, I use a GROW model. So the GROW model just is 4 different categories of kinds of powerful questions. So the G in GROW is goal. So what does success look like? What's the outcome that you want to have? Any question that's around defining the best case scenario. The R in the GROW model is about your current reality. Where are you stuck? What are your current challenges? What have you tried? The O is about your options. So let's expand the opportunities that you can understand of the choices you have in front of you. What are the various paths you could take? And the W in the grow model is the way forward. What are you going to do next? So this sounds simple, and it is simple if you take the time and space to listen carefully and ask any of these questions. The people on your team will appreciate the space and time to unlock an option that they didn't think of before and walk away with a concrete next step.
Okay, so just to reflect back what you're saying. So this is someone comes to you with a monkey on their back. Here's a problem I'm trying to solve. This problem, this person on my team is just like not doing something right, or this feature isn't working, something like that. So first of all, it's listen, be very active in your listening, reflect back what you're hearing, their emotions.
Yeah.
And then ask them questions around, what does success look like for this? What is the goal? What is the goal? What does success look like for the thing you're trying to hear? What does success look like? 2 is just what's today's reality, what's happening today. Then options, here's options that you think exist. So this is you asking them, what are the options?
Yeah, what are your paths forward? What could you do next?
What could you do next? And then you, this is organic, so it's not just like 1, 2, 3, 4, I imagine.
Yeah.
But the final step is just, okay, what's the way forward? What do you want to do?
That's exactly right. And you don't have to do it in this order. These are just 4 kinds of questions. So you might come and someone's super clear about their outcome. You know that. You don't need to spend any time asking them questions about that. Maybe you just want to really dig in on where are they stuck. And once they start talking about their reality and where they're stuck, then they realize, oh, I'm stuck because my cross-functional partner is blocking me and I don't have any relationship with them. I need to go meet with them actually and just have a breakthrough conversation, tell them where I'm stuck. So sometimes talking this out loud, just creating that space for them is going to help them tremendously.
And there's kind of an implication here that the person often knows the answer or can come to the answer, and they just need a little bit of nudge to get there.
Yeah, this is definitely, you want to coach when you think the person you're talking to has the right context and can solve their own problem. That's a premise of coaching. You wouldn't coach if someone needs your guidance and comes to you and says, hey, I'm trying to take my company public. You took your company public. Can you tell me exactly the steps you took to get there? Not a good time to coach.
There's kind of like, this begs the question, what if they just come to a terrible conclusion and you're just like, advice on when to actually just like, what about this instead?
Yeah, okay, I think that's great. So if you have a really strong negative reaction to what they're sharing, of course, it doesn't behoove anyone to hide that. I think you get curious. Hey, help me understand how you came to that conclusion, because here's my reaction to that. So you're honest, but you're also curious. So coaching in a manager or leader context is not the same as in an executive coaching conversation. You're managing this person. You're responsible for their outcomes. You're not setting up an hour-long coaching session. You're just using coaching as an additional tool in your toolkit from advising. And you're creating more space, maybe 15% more space in your one-on-ones, in your meetings for open-ended questions.
I love this phrase, help me understand. One of my managers used to be really good at this. Just like, you could tell he's like, help me understand this part of your thinking.
Yeah. And the other thing that does when you're curious and you don't just shut down someone's idea is you're helping them think. You're not helping them realize they're going to screw it up unless they come to you for advice. You're helping equip them with the right questions to ask and the right skepticism to have. And so it's always useful to be in conversation when someone who reports to you has a different worldview than you do. There's some reason they came up with this great idea that you think is a terrible idea. And actually, that's where the learning happens.
And you may actually be wrong. And you may realize, okay, they actually have the better solution. I get it now.
Yeah, this actually happens to me all the time in talent conversations because I have a background in being an HR business partner. And I'm working with CEOs and they're thinking about building their leadership team. And I want everyone to have a very rigorous stance on their talent, because if you have an A+ squad, you're going to do great things in the world. And sometimes they come up with an idea to performance manage someone who's clearly not working in the role, but think, oh, maybe I'll wait 6 months and then we'll have a conversation. I have a strong point of view. I'm not going to let that slide. But I'm going to say, help me understand why that is a good idea. And I'm going to press on that. And if they don't come to an idea that I'm aligned with, I'm going to share openly my perspective while still empowering them to solve their own problem.
To close the loop on this piece of advice, is there an example you could share to make this super concrete for folks?
Well, I'm going to give you an example of a client. I'm going to call him Jeff, who runs an AI company. And he was essentially playing the role of the head of product also. And he had a growing number of engineers and designers, and his customer base was growing rapidly. And he started to feel completely overwhelmed. So he came to me and we started coaching together. And soon he realized that he was the blocker on every decision, every business decision, every product decision. And he was resenting it. He wanted his team to take more ownership. But with some coaching, he realized he was training his team to come to him with every decision because he had always operated that way. So he decided to create squads and have small pods of engineers, product leaders, and designers focus on subsets of the team. Very normal as you have a small startup scaling. But he didn't have an engineering manager and a product leader for every one of them. So this was a little bit earlier than he was equipped for because he did it out of necessity. And he also realized he needed to create some behavior change for the way he was interacting with the tech lead on each project so that they would take more ownership. So he really invested in this idea of, I'm going to start to set the system up. So we have a product review every 2 weeks. They each have clear KPIs they're driving to that we co-design. And for this next quarter, I'm shifting from the role of deciding on everything to coaching. I'm going to really ask good questions in our check-ins. I'm going to align to the KPIs, ask how things are going, ask where they're stuck. And I just had a session with him last week. It's amazing to see him because he's so much more energized. He said the squads are moving so much faster. The teams feel more empowered and motivated. And he has time to pick his head up and plan for 2026 and spend his time in his gifts, which are product vision and strategy. So that's more of a global example of what results from leaders shifting from the mode of solving every problem to coaching.
That's such a great example of just the power of this. Is this makes your life so much better because other people can start picking up the slack and not come to you for everything. And it's like, listen better, ask a few powerful questions, and so much improves, so much changes. Everyone around you gets better.
Lenny, let's try it. So I want you to tell me a challenge. It could be a personal challenge, a professional challenge, just bottom line, something that you're struggling with.
Whoa. The main thing I struggle with these days is just endless work. I feel like I started this newsletter 6-7 years ago at this point. And originally it was like, I'm just going to build this chill newsletter, do this on the side, just kind of chill out for a while. And now it's just like, it just grows. I couldn't help but make it more awesome and bigger, and have this podcast now and other stuff I got going on. So it's always this. So I'm in a world now where it's just this. The way I think about it is the Indiana Jones boulder is constantly in my back rearview mirror, just coming at me because I need to get a newsletter post out, get podcast episodes out, do all the things associated with that. I'm also just in the middle of, I have this large Slack community at Twitter and LinkedIn, so I'm just constantly being barraged with small little asks and things and all these little things it's hard to just ignore and say no to. So what I struggle with is just endless work. I joke that be careful working for yourself if your boss is a workaholic.
I totally relate to that. Okay, yeah. So I'm hearing noise, barrage of needs, and just constant requests of you online, in your work life. There's always something that you need to be doing. And you've designed it that way yourself. So you're kind of aware of, I had this one intention of a path to freedom, insight. I imagine the newsletter was like a fun passion project. Mm-hmm. And you couldn't help but make it this all-consuming full-time job.
That's right. Let me just add, it's in so many ways, the most awesome thing I could ever imagine doing also, and extremely fulfilling. And I couldn't think of anything better I'd rather be doing.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important element. But
absolutely.
Still, it's this Indiana Jones boulder constantly chasing me.
Yeah, I can feel the gratitude and the resonance with what you get to do every day. And yet I hear you questioning, why does it have to feel like I'm fighting for my life? while I'm doing this thing I love.
That's one way to put it. Yeah.
I mean,
This boulder squishing me.
Indiana Jones boulders coming for you.
Oh man,
That's a fight or flight instinct we all have.
That's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
So thank you for being vulnerable enough to share that with your listeners and with me. I want to ask you, what would dream state look like? So let's say in 6 months, you're still running this beautiful business that you've created and you feel differently. What is happening?
What I imagine is the same thing, mostly just much more free time. So more time to experiment and play with other things. And at the same time, the newsletter continues to be awesome and high quality. The podcast continues to be awesome and high quality. So it's continuing to put out the same high quality stuff, just more free time, less, the boulders may be smaller.
Yeah. Okay. So what does free time enable for you? When you think about, I hear your deep commitment to quality products and quality output, but this longing to feel a little bit more playful or flexible with those parts that are essential to you.
Very practically, it's time to play around with, AI tools, just like explore and just kind of tinker versus like, okay, all the time I have, I need to focus on the newsletter, make it better for next week. Oh, it's coming out. Here's the things I got to do. Oh, this podcast, got to prep for that. Got to edit this thing. So it's just time to tinker and explore and just like, that kind of thing, that kind of stuff.
That makes sense. And what's important about exploring and tinkering to you?
Because in the work I do, I need to stay ahead on where things are going. I can't just, sit around and pontificate from a cloud. I need to really understand how things work, what's working, what's not, what's real, what's not. So being on the ground as much as I can with what's actually going on versus just, putting out content.
That makes sense. Your voice is moving really fast. I kind of hear you feeling behind, even in the way you're describing what you're doing.
Good active listening.
What's interesting to me is when you're talking about exploring and tinkering, when you first said it, you said it's in kind of a spacious way. Like it's fun to explore and tinker. You're deeply naturally curious. You find new insights. But then I also heard you say, and it's a way to stay ahead. I have to do it in order to feel like I'm informed. So what do you make of that difference?
Yeah. Those are two sides of the coin. There's like another element of, I guess, let me answer that question. I think those are both true. I don't know. Because it's actually like the reason I got into this is because it was so fun and so interesting. Just like, here's what's happening. Here's what the future, here's advice. Here's ways to improve in the work that you do. So there's still I still love it. It's just I have less time to do that part and more it's just like the machine of the treadmill of content. Yeah. There's also just like spending more, like I didn't even mention this, but just spending more time with my son and my wife, that would be really great. Just to have more freedom to go do stuff, which we have a lot of that, but more is great. That makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. So the goal that I hear is not so dramatically different from today. It's that you hold on to this high quality output, but you have space for exploring and tinkering and for spending quality time with the people you love most.
Yes. The one way I'm thinking about as you reflect that back is like 25% more free time while everything else continues to be awesome. And the challenge I run into is I sometimes get that extra time and then I fill it with more projects and opportunities.
Yeah,
that's
there's that like inertia of moving fast, taking advantage of the moment that's coming.
Yeah.
So that's a perfect shift into what are your current ways of operating that get in the way of having that 25% of free time?
It's just like agreeing to more things. Just like, oh, look, I'm kind of free right now. Oh, okay, let's do this. Let's do this talk here. Let's agree to this thing here. It's just once I feel freedom, I'm like, okay, I could do that other thing. And so I commit to more stuff.
Yeah. And how is that commitment to saying yes to things that come at you serving you?
Not great.
Well, it's serving you in some ways. Like you're doing it for a reason. What is it? What benefit does it have to you?
Well, it depends on the thing. Like I actually have a rule of never doing a talk or going on another podcast or going to events really, because I find I never really get much out of it and it distracts me from the stuff I could be doing. So I've set up a lot of policies of just turning down things that don't serve me. But I still crumble and say yes to stuff.
Yeah, that's
So yeah,
smart.
so yeah, to your point, there's value here and there when I take on more work, and then I end up overworked again.
Yeah, I'm hearing there's just a pattern. It's like a reflexive pattern of
Yeah.
even though you set a rule for yourself to say no to certain things and you seem proud of that boundary, you naturally break it or you fall into filling it with other things.
That's right. Exactly.
Okay. So you're stuck in this kind of addiction to doing more and signing up for more, which is so normal in our world. And probably most
Yes.
listeners can relate to that.
Mm.
That's kind of the soup we swim in. So we have to be conscious of what inputs we have around us.
Mm-hmm.
So let's explore your various options that you have in front of you. One that you mentioned already you tried was to make a list of the things you don't want to be doing anymore, like things you want to say no to, and really committing to that and sticking to that.
Mm-hmm.
What are the other kinds of things you could do to help you prioritize and create that sacred 25% of extra time for yourself?
Something I've already done, which hasn't kicked in fully yet, but that I'm really excited about, is I reduced the cadence of my newsletter and podcast, which in theory should be a massive change, but the cadence of the podcast hasn't shifted down yet. It'll happen next year. The newsletter cadences, I basically changed my promise to readers. Instead of you will receive a newsletter every week, now it's 2 to 4 times a month, depending on what's going on, which felt huge. The problem is I still every week I'm like, I want to write about this thing. Every week there's things happening. I got to put this out. So I'm almost not taking advantage of that opportunity. So something I could do is actually not publish every week. Another is just bring on some more help, which is difficult because I've got a lot of good help. And there's only so many things other people can do for me. That isn't writing an awesome newsletter and recording conversations like this.
Yeah.
But I'm always thinking about, and I should think deeper about where can people take more load off my plate.
Yeah, I love that insight. If you, what I'm hearing is do less in certain areas and think about your team and really expanding the capacity of your team and be rigorous about the things you can hand off. You may have limiting beliefs around the things you need to do versus the people on your team.
I might. And then your point I loved, which is just improve my policies of what I say no to that don't serve me.
Yeah. What are the things you could be saying yes to if you said no to more things?
Just playing around with stuff, just space to explore and tinker and just sit around and think versus just go.
Yeah. And I just see you feel so light and excited in that. Like you almost are giddy when you think about that spaciousness.
That'd be so nice.
And I just want to reflect back to you how special that is and how much more creative you could be in your work when you have that space and time and your bucket's full with care.
I feel that.
Yeah. So what's one thing you could do in the next 2 weeks that would help you get closer to the kind of spaciousness you want to create?
I love that as we go through this, I'm thinking about this grow framework, and I love how you're executing. I see it in action.
Yeah,
so
I'm
good.
trying to do very simple coaching right now.
This is great.
So that it's really easy to follow for your listeners.
Yeah, this is great. Okay, so what's the one thing I could do in the next couple weeks to help me move forward on this? I think one is at least skip a week or two of the newsletter and just actually stick to that plan. So, but it's tough because the next 2 weeks I got already planned. I got to write a gift guide. That's my, okay. So the week after I'll take a break. Okay, cool. So 2 weeks from the recording this, I won't publish a newsletter. And then I'm going to revisit my policies on what I say yes and no to.
I love that. Think about everything you're saying yes to and what are things you want to say yes to that you could trade it with. So really consider that it's a trade-off every time you say yes to something. The more resonant you are with the end state and what's possible for you, the easier it is to be disciplined in the near term.
I love just that element of here's what you will get out of this. It's not just no. It's like yes to this other thing you really want to do.
Exactly. Yeah. Say it like a resonant, full-bodied yes to the things that are in your life.
Yes.
You want. Yeah. Hell yes with an exclamation. Exactly.
Awesome.
Okay. Well, thank you, Lenny, for letting me just demonstrate what powerful questions are. And the reason I wanted to do that with you is, you brought an example that's actually pretty big. It's an emotional thing. It's a cultural norm. It's a way of being that we've all learned to be through growing up and operating in tech, especially. So even with that kind of topic, using a simple grow model can be useful. But people are coming at your listeners with topics that are very complicated, technical, urgent, but the same kinds of questions unlock new opportunity when it's about how to build technical infrastructure or how to influence the executive team or how to ship the go-to-market strategy. So I just want a name that's very transferable.
I love that I got great advice in this conversation already. What a great ROI for me, at least.
What did it feel like to be coached on your own podcast?
It was unusual. I'm just like, wait, I got to get back to asking you questions. That's where I'm
okay, all right. We can flip it. I do want to name that typically when you're coached versus told what to do, you're more bought in. So if I told you, Lenny, I've heard all kinds of leaders come to me talking about being too busy. Here's what you should do. Write a list of all the things you're doing. Write the things you're going to delegate. Cut out 25% of the things on your calendar. I could have given you a laundry list of things that I thought you should do without much context, but you're the expert on your own context and actually what resonates. And you're much more likely to do it if you came up with it.
I was going to mention that earlier. That is so incredibly true. Like no one wants to, unless you ask for advice, very few people are like, please tell me what to do. Just tell me. I really love you. Just unsolicited advice. Like that doesn't go well.
Yeah. And great leaders often say, do you want advice or do you want some space to think about it? Like, can I help you think it through or would you like me to tell you what I would do? And both are fine in certain situations. So asking is useful too.
Yeah. Okay. That's such an important element of this that we should have mentioned. And I'm glad you did.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to go back to asking you questions.
Great.
This is a good segue to something I wanted to spend a little time on, which is burnout.
Yeah.
What I'm talking about is stuff that often leads to burnout. I'm definitely not burnt out, but this is a common problem in tech where people feel depleted and just go too hard. And then so many people I've worked with just left tech. I had a colleague at Airbnb. He's like a park ranger now in Muir Woods. And that's how far
peaceful.
Tech. So peaceful and so wonderful. But I think that's just people go so hard sometimes and then just get burnt out and never want to do anything like this again. Mm-hmm. I know that you spent a lot of time on this with founders and you have a really helpful approach. So just talk about what you've learned about helping leaders in tech avoid burnout and feel energized and excited about their work for a long time.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm glad you brought it up. It's a huge problem. I remember when I was coaching top talent at Stripe, Patrick Carlson is really committed to retaining top talent. And I created a program with my team for the top 50 executives in the tech side of the house. And we looked at their engagement scores. We did coaching circles. And it was so sad to see how exhausted that group of incredibly creative and committed leaders was in that moment. And it's so common that people who start with incredible inspiration and incredible capacity start to feel like they've been pushing and pushing and pushing for years. They're parenting, they're leading, crazy things are happening to the business, and they just can't muster the same kind of motivation they once had. And I see this with my clients all the time. So I've also witnessed people who are still inspired and continually energetic and seem to have some secret well of, some diesel battery, or I guess I should say a Tesla battery that helps them through really hard challenges, and they're still having a good time. And so what I make of that is that when people are in their gifts and their strengths firmly, most of the time, they have more energy. We all have more energy when we're operating from the things we naturally are good at and the things we innately love doing. So I try to help my leaders see that they can design their lives so they're spending 80% of their time in their gifts. That seems really ambitious because you're stuck within a context that requires a lot of you, especially when you're an executive at a huge company. But I also interact with founders who started a company with great inspiration, an entrepreneurial vision, and their job has obviously changed every 6 months. Once you fundraise, once you grow a team, and sometimes especially technical founders will start solving a technical problem they're absolutely obsessed with. They spend 3 years doing it, the product ships, and then they're stuck managing a board and a team, and they don't even realize they're doing a completely different job than the one that played to their strengths. So one tool I like to give is for people to actually take 2 weeks and every night reflect on what are the 5 things today that gave me the most energy? And what are the 5 things that depleted my energy the most? If you do that for 2 weeks and you look at patterns, you can tell what are the natural gifts that I'm living in and what are the things that I'm stuck doing that are exhausting. And they're just it's like a slow leak in your gas tank that over time shows up in your daily amount of energy.
I so believe this advice is so effective. This is the way I actually approached when I left my job. I very actively did this. I paid attention every day, what gave me energy and what sapped my energy. And let me just do more of the thing that gave me energy and less of the thing that saps me. I want to talk about just like, there's only so much you can change, but I want to talk about that.
Yeah.
And so initially I was like, maybe I'll become an advisor and consultant kind of person. I actually found that was super depleting for me.
Interesting.
Doing these calls and talking to people because it's like surface level, here are some things I would do. Yeah. And it was just so unexciting and energizing, but writing was really energizing, which I never expected. And
I love that.
And that's what I did. And I just followed that pull.
And it sounds like maybe you need a refresh, Lenny.
Oh, interesting.
There's always more attuning you can do to your gifts. Like you're in this you've clearly been successful for a reason. You're in your strengths and you're paying attention to what brings you energy. We can always do that more throughout our life. I think it's a process of continually kind of tuning in to where your spark is and protecting that spark, feeding it.
I love that insight. That just blew my mind. So very tactically, the way you would do this is for 2 weeks every night is the idea. Reflect back on that day and write down 5 things that gave you energy, 5 things that sap you of energy.
Yeah, there's so many different activities you could use. So that's one. I like an activity of actually asking 5 to 10 people in your life with a very simple email. When I walk in the room, what shows up? What are my strengths? What are the gifts? If you really don't know them and you haven't spent a lot of time in this realm, that's also an opportunity of actually asking the people who know you best what your core gifts are and when do you have the most inspiration. You can also look through your calendar and note themes. Okay, over the last month, what are all the things I look at on my calendar that I'm excited to do? What are the things I dread? Okay, why do I dread those things? What do those things have in common? So there's various ways you can get to kind of what is your zone of genius. But what my invitation is to take that really seriously. It actually takes risk taking. It takes intention to design your life around your gifts.
Is there any advice for actually doing this? Say someone's just like, yeah, I got to do this, but most people don't actually do this. Is there like a buddy you can nominate, just help me do this? Is it like, if you have an EA that can maybe help you with this? Is there anything
That's
you've
a good
seen?
Question. Yeah, I love your ideas. I think that the people around you need to be on board and know what are your gifts. So for example, when I was an HR business partner, my boss bought into this and I explained to her, hey, I started at Stripe because I actually know I'm going to be a coach. I'm not going to be a head of HR, but I love working with leaders. So I'm going to, do all the compensation strategy and all of the org design, and I'm going to help product and engineering leaders. But what I have in the back of my mind is I'm honing my coaching skills. And so when this opportunity to work on top talent retention came about, it was very aligned in the realm of coaching and L&D background that I had. So she put me on that. So it's useful to name it to the people around you. What are your gifts? What are your interests? What skills are you really excited to hone so that they are in a contract with you to help you and really apply your gifts to the business's needs? So that's one thing. When you're a founder or CEO, when you have the autonomy to consider what are the role scopes around me, then you can really hire around it. So I have some CEOs that I work with who are incredible visionaries, great strategists, really good at managing the board, hiring, et cetera, terrible at managing their team. Hate it. So they hire a COO and they work in partnership. They have one person who's really internally focused. They get to be externally focused. That works well. It's a symbiotic relationship. If you're honest about your strengths and your weaknesses, then you can start to manage around them.
This episode is brought to you by Persona, the verified identity platform helping organizations onboard users, fight fraud, and build trust. We talk a lot on this podcast about the amazing advances in AI, but this can be a double-edged sword. For every wow moment, there are fraudsters using the same tech to wreak havoc, laundering money, taking over employee identities, and impersonating businesses. Persona helps combat these threats with automated user, business, and employee verification. Whether you're looking to catch candidate fraud, meet age restrictions, or keep your platform safe, Persona helps you verify users in a way that's tailored to your specific needs. Best of all, Persona makes it easy to know who you're dealing with without adding friction for good users. This is why leading platforms like Etsy, LinkedIn, Square, and Lyft trust Persona to secure their platform. Persona is also offering my listeners 500 free services per month for 1 full year. Just head to withpersona.com/Lenny to get started. That's withpersona.com/Lenny. Thanks again to Persona for sponsoring this episode. It's really nice to know what you want to do and understand where your dream life looks like. You also have a job, you have a manager, you got things to do, you got responsibilities. So I guess first of all is you have seen people that are not founders actually make a change to do the things, to spend more time in their gifts, to actually not just be like there is, you have agency to move in a direction that'll make
Absolutely.
you happier is kind of an implied piece of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think sometimes people hire a chief of staff to help them and complement them. Sometimes people design their team with strengths and gifts that they don't have. So it's really there. You can get creative once you really understand, oh, these things give me a ton of energy and these things are exhausting, but I still need to fill this need for the business. What are all the ways I can do it?
And telling your manager, I think, is such a simple and important part of this. Telling them, here's where I want to go. Here's the things I want to get better at. Here's the things that give me energy. Can we just try to make as much of my role that?
Yeah, especially if you're executing well. People want to retain you. They want to know what's going to keep you here for the next 5 years. And typically they think that means moving up the ladder, but maybe it doesn't for you. I think it does take the courage to move horizontally sometimes to get into your strengths. And I've moved horizontally a number of times and I love what I do. I feel like I'm in my natural gifts. But it took me a few risks and some uncomfortable jobs that didn't feel like they were worthy of my experience in order to get there.
What's like a good percentage of your work life that should be in gifts and things that energize you versus, okay, I actually got to do
my
some
litmus test
stuff.
is 80%. That's the goal.
80%.
That's the aspiration. You're always going to have 20% of things you don't love doing. There's just the logistics of getting into the zone that you need to be in. But I really try to push people to think aspirationally that if you're 80% of the time in your gifts, how much energy you have to give to the world. It's so much more inspiring. So I want to tell you why I'm passionate about this topic, because it actually is how I ended up as an executive coach. So 10 years ago, I was working at a small company called Remind, and I was running the UX research team. And the CEO asked me to move into the product manager role for the core product team. And I was excited for the opportunity. I had non-technical background, but I thought, hey, all these strategists are up there creating the roadmap. I can do that. I know exactly what our users need. So I was excited for this. I, came into the team. There was, I think, 12 senior engineers, very opinionated, very skeptical of this non-technical PM, but we worked together. And what I did was I listened. I learned, what do our users need? What does this team need? What's working and not working? And within a month, this team was working well together. They were, reviewing each other's code base. They were really disagreeing in a healthy way in our team meetings. They felt more connected to users. And I felt like, okay, this rhythm's working. But what I was also doing is I was at home stressing in the middle of the night about the new user experience. I couldn't decide which of the designs to go with. I was always over leveraging our data scientists, and I found myself swirling on decisions that didn't need to have so much stress involved. And one day I went for a walk with my colleague, Zach Abrams, and he was a great product manager. And he was listening to me ask all these questions about how to sell the vision of what this product would look like in the future. And he said, Rachel, your zone of genius or your gift is not being a product strategist. But I've watched you over the last few months, and you have gotten the team more motivated than I ever could. And you've influenced the entire executive team behind your ideas. And that's impressive. You're a people person. And at first, I was offended. What? You think I don't have the ability to be a great product leader? And yet, I sat with what he said, and I knew he was right. Both my parents are therapists. I never wanted to be a therapist. Here I am. I'm basically a work therapist. I love entrepreneurial energy. I love big vision, but I'm a people person. And I left that and I realized I love what my coach does. I got trained as a coach. I went into HR leadership. And Zach, who was a gifted product strategist, went on to lead product at Coinbase and Brex, and most recently Bridge, which was acquired by Stripe. And he's still my client. And we've watched our journeys over the last decade. And we've both been honing our gifts. And life is more fun when you're in your gifts. And you have more inspiration and capacity to offer the world. So I just want to share that story because it's helpful to be honest with the people you care about when they seem energized and when they seem depleted. Because sometimes it's a wake-up call for people to really think about what is their spark and to protect it and to feed it.
I love that story because I think most people, when they hear this advice and this kind of topic of, okay, I am feeling depleted, I'm feeling burnt out, I feel like most people jump to, okay, but I can't actually do anything about it. I have a job, I got responsibilities. What I'm getting from this is there's actually, the most important step is jump to figure out what you actually should be doing, what gives you energy, what your gifts are. It feels like that's the biggest gap for people because once you know that, there are ways to do that. Talk to your manager. Hey, here's some may not be possible today, but here's where I want to be going. Here's what I want to be spending time on. I love your point you made though about you actually have to be doing well for your manager to listen to. You can't just be like sucking and then like, oh, but I want to work on strategy.
Yeah, well, it's no one else's job to help you live in your gifts. And what I notice in big companies is people are often annoyed or frustrated with their management for not making their job more interesting. It's like, no, your manager's job is to help you perform in the job you were hired to do. It's your job to navigate your career. So over the arc of your career, how do you match your gifts with the world's needs? And if the world right now is your company, how do you understand the needs enough so that you can apply your strengths to those needs?
This reminds me, there's a couple guests I've had on the podcast who did this. They're both founders, so it's, this is specific to founders, but Rahul Vora at Superhuman, he realized he's just not, he's not like the best executor in the operations person, so he hired a president that took all that off his plate. Mm-hmm. And then Dharmesh, co-founder of HubSpot, he knew from the beginning he didn't want to manage people. So he made a rule with his co-founder, I will never have reports.
Yeah.
And he's the CTO, I believe, and has 0 reports, has no one-on-ones.
Yeah. And I think that it's a beautiful thing to recognize that, but then to actually address the needs of those reports also. I think often people know, I don't want to have any one-on-ones, but just not having anyone manage those people is not going to be healthy for your company. So you have to both take your strengths seriously and actively manage around your weaknesses. Is
there any maybe last piece of advice on this topic of helping people get to a place where they're feeling much less depleted and just more energized at work?
I would start small. You don't have to leave your job and redesign your life. You can stop going to the optional things that are exhausting. You can leave space between the things that are depleting that you have to go outside and go on a 30-minute walk and refuel your tank. Start with tomorrow. What are the 3 things you're going to do to plug up that gas leak and re-energize your spark? It might even be you love to read and you're going to start reading 30 minutes before you go to sleep every night. It doesn't have to be a dramatic life change, but recognize that only you know what is resonant and what is depleting. And it's your job to take that seriously if you want to show up purposeful and impactful in the world.
I love that advice. I've actually started reading before bed. for 30 minutes. And that's been so joyful, like a physical book with a little nightlight.
Yeah, I agree. I love a physical book. I have a Kindle, I got all the things, but a physical book on the couch is the best.
Yeah, it's just the nightlight is key because, at nighttime, it's like, you need a light.
Especially
Okay.
now.
So we've been talking mostly, right, so far about kind of individual improvement, how to figure out what you should be working on, just helping, learning to coach, things like that. I want to kind of take us up a level above and talk about team skills, help people get better at working with other people. Something that you're in many ways known for is helping co-founders build better relationships. And in my experience, this is one of the most challenging parts of starting a company is the co-founder relationship. A lot of people don't realize what they're getting into. You're basically getting married to this person in like a very high stress situation, and you sometimes don't know much about them.
Exactly.
And then you not working well together is just a huge issue because that all trickles down and everyone sees it. And when co-founders leave, it's really bad for everyone. So let me just ask you this. What have you found most helpful in helping co-founders build great relationships, stay happy and productive?
Yeah, thanks for asking this. I love working with co-founders because I think your core values as a person come out when they interact with someone else's core values. Conflict, healthy conflict or otherwise, is actually where your core values come out. So it's fascinating to watch people try to do something incredibly hard in the context of someone else's vision, someone else's strengths and weaknesses, and navigate that together. So there's so much energy in the co-founder dynamic for me and for co-founders themselves. It's actually something that people don't feel comfortable going to their board about or talking to that many people about because it's a private matter. It's almost like in a marriage, you go see a couples therapist, but you don't tell all your friends that you can't stand your partner, but it keeps you up at night. So it's a really tender, important relationship, and there aren't enough supports for co-founders to navigate it. It's very normal. In fact, I know you probably know this stat, 65% of startups fail because of co-founder conflict. And co-founders are in a moment where they're trying to build the future for their business, but also trying to build their own livelihood. So there's so much at stake to get along with your co-founder. And I think the core, at its core, what you need in a healthy relationship is, one, self-awareness. What do I bring into this dynamic? And how am I being experienced by the other person? What does this other person bring into the dynamic? And how am I reacting to that? So the first is just collective awareness about what is our dynamic. I like to use the Enneagram for this, but there's all kinds of tools, self-awareness tools that you can use to give a common language to what is my thing and what is your thing. A very classic one has to do with roles. CTOs tend to be skeptics. They love facts. They seek knowledge. They want depth of awareness and understanding. And they also like to be self-sufficient. This is a total generalization, but I've seen this pattern over and over again. The CEO is the person who had to sell the vision. They're a person who loves big picture vision strategy. They often are great at influencing others. They love to sell ahead of the reality of what the company's actually built. This creates an inherent tension between blind optimism and skepticism. And it's a dance that these two roles play together. So the first part is knowing the dance you're in. So you're not just stepping on each other's toes blindly. The second step is actually being conscious about the commitment you're making to your relationship. So in a marriage, for example, people, I talk about co-founder vows and recommitments and renewals, because in a marriage, you get married and a lot of the times people build a family and then they think, oh, the relationship will just continue because we're around each other all the time. We're doing this thing together. But just like couples need a date night, co-founders need time and space to connect with each other, to come together and say, how's this working for you? Are we still aligned on our vision and our strategy? How are we working together? What am I doing that's pissing you off? What are the things that have gone unsaid and that we need to talk about? But if you're just in the hustle and bustle of running and scaling your startup, you don't make time for that conversation. So I think it's incredibly important for co-founders to make space for their relationship, whether that's a dinner every other week, whether that's going out to lunch regularly, whether that's just touching base business-wise, but having an in-person quarterly check-in. that space is critical for the health of a co-founder relationship.
On that second piece, the vows idea is such a good idea. Is that something you actually recommend? Like, here's what I vow to do. Like,
Here's what I commit to do. So I have recently, I actually wrote an article with First Round, and we created a document to help co-founders think about what to integrate into their check-in. So we put out weekly check-in, monthly check-in, and annual, and just questions to sit down and ask each other. Active listening skills will come in handy in those conversations, but it's about taking space out of hustling and running the business to think about the business from a kind of rather, I like to say, instead of being on the dance floor, you need time on the balcony to look down at what's happening. How are we doing? Is this still working for both of us? And the vows are really about how are we going to be together? How are we going to show up? Like, what's our culture that we're creating? Even if you don't want to go through a whole culture exercise early on in building your company, you should have some sense of how you want to show up for each other. How are we going to make decisions? How are we going to deal with conflict? These are things you can go into intentionally and design with your co-founder.
Awesome. We're going to link to that post. The first step, Enneagram, sounds like that's what you recommend. And this is basically a personality profile that a lot of people love.
I really like the Enneagram. I think you can also simply tell each other, here are my strengths. Here's what I see as my weaknesses. And what do you think? Give me some feedback. Do you agree? And you can do that with each other without any personality assessment. If you want to just be scrappy and have an open, connected conversation about you could even say, what are the gifts I bring and the weaknesses I have, and how will I cover those? How will I lean into my gifts? How will I cover my weaknesses? And how will you? And then I think it's worthwhile having a conversation about what are the gaps neither of us cover that we're likely going to need as we build this business.
What do you recommend people do when they are just like, our relationship isn't working great? It's like there's a lot of tension. All this advice we've been talking about is like, at the beginning, here's things you can do to set things up for success. Understand what you're good at, what you're bringing to the table, consciously commit to here's what I'm going to do, here's what you're going to do, have these dinners or lunches. I love this metaphor of going out on the balcony and just reflecting on how it's going. So that's all really great. What if you're just already in it and just like, it's really annoying, I don't like this person that much, or so much tension constantly? What are a couple things they can do this week, next week?
Co-founders typically come to me either in this early phase where they want to intentionally build something great and they want to set it up for success. More often, co-founders come when they're really frustrated with one another. They feel the tension is palpable. They can't stand it anymore, but they're still really deeply committed to the business. So they don't see an out. And they knew that at some point they really loved this co-founder. So they see a possibility of recovering. And that's why they want to go get a coach. I'm going to give you an example of this PR duo running a fierce business, scaling really fast. And at one point when they started, you had the visionary who was great at selling business. They were both incredible with PR. And the partner was incredible operationally. So as the business scaled, one took on a lot more business development and the other took on all the internal things, but was exhausted by all this people management and all of the elements of kind of running a scaled team that she didn't expect to have to do. And when they came, I think both of them weren't sure, can we figure this out? Do we want to just sell this thing? Do we want to keep going? And I think someone said, end it or send it, was what one co-founder said to me. You know, they're coming at this decision point. And what I saw them do is, one, they named current state really well. They were both able to share. We did use a 360, so they got feedback from their teams and then shared it with one another. But they were able to be open and vulnerable in what was working and what wasn't working. Not immediately, but over time. And they realized they used to love being partners in this work, but as they began to lead different teams, they grew very distant from one another. They were living on opposite sides of the country and actually just coming together and realizing what each other was missing and how lonely it is to lead this scaling company without each other's support, and how they actually needed the counterbalance to their strengths and didn't have it. was an important start to their healing. And over our coaching, they turned back towards each other and they created more of a rhythm of how they would get together without me involved. And they ended coaching after our arc feeling renewed and really recommitted. They made some changes on their leadership team to fill their gaps. They also started, I think, meeting once a week virtually, and they started a cadence of getting together in person quarterly. And I don't mean to say that just that time means you're going to heal. Sometimes coming together and really grappling. I had one last week where we all came together. We had a great full day in-person discussion about how they were making this co-founder duo, how they were making decisions. And after that conversation, it was really clear that one of the co-founders was unhappy and didn't appreciate the other one and was not going to change and realized he was a big part of the problem and I think is going to leave the business. But that's still success because it's clarity. You're not muddling in the dark, frustrated, unconscious about the interpersonal dynamics you're in. You're making a choice based on your strengths and what the business needs and this relationship dynamic that you're in, to either be in it or to lovingly step out of it.
I love how similar this is to just a marriage. All the stuff you're like, this is the same sort of thing you do.
Totally. I mean, a marriage, you're building a life with a partner. Yeah. So the only difference is a marriage is rooted in sexual attraction and love. And that's not the case always in the co-founder dynamic. But I have worked with couples who are also co-founders, but there should be some element of love for your co-founder. In fact, I think that when you work closely with colleagues and you really are able to see their gifts and enable them, you can't help but love them.
That's a big statement. The other takeaway here is that just get coaching. It feels like that's the solution if things are just not working great. Like there's only so far you can get just talking.
It takes an evolved facilitator, like one of the co-founders being able to hold space for both their frustration and their empathy in a dynamic that is challenging. So outside support is useful. Sometimes it's actually a team member. It's an HR leader. It's the GC who happens to have great people skills. You don't always need a coach, but you need space to be vulnerable, open, and curious. So if you can create that on your own, that's great. I think it's definitely possible.
Outside of the co-founder relationship, do you have any just tactical tips for people to improve their interpersonal skills with just team members, anyone they work with, just people that may struggle? Like, man, I have a hard time with this person. I just have a hard time with a lot of people.
First of all, people, when they want to have a conflict or they want to engage in something that's not working, they come in armored and ready to prove their point. It's natural. You've been thinking about this, perseverating over whether you should mention it. You finally get to the point of engaging. And often there's a misguided view that the goal is to convince the other person that what they're doing is wrong. Actually, the goal of any conflict is to create mutual understanding. So when I go in to have a conversation with, let's say, my husband who's not doing his share of the parenting, my goal is to help him understand what I'm struggling with so that he can empathize, see clearly what's happening, and perhaps meet my needs in some way. But it's not for me to prove to him how little he's doing in the house, because he might have a totally different story about what's happening. So I'm going to give you a framework that I like, that many of my clients use. It's from Marshall Rosenberg's Nonviolent Communication. He has a book and a framework. So it's 4 steps. The first step is observations. So my job is to note what is happening factually. For example, I noticed that in the last 3 sprint planning meetings, you didn't show me you didn't invite me to those conversations or share with me the roadmap. That's an observation. It's a fact. I could take a picture of it and no one would argue with it. The next step is feelings. So I'm going to express my feelings without blame. So I felt anxious, not knowing what was on the roadmap for the week. I felt confused about whether that meeting happened or not because I wasn't included. So this is me sharing my feelings so the other party can empathize and understand what I'm going through without being defensive. The third step is needs. What are my universal human needs related to this topic? We all have needs. This is not requiring anything of the other person, just helping them understand my needs that are not met. So I have a need for clarity. I have a need for collaboration. I have a need for connection, whatever that is. And lastly, the step is to make a request. Now, in this model, the request is an olive branch to help the other person meet you and see you. It shouldn't be something that's impossible to do. It should be actually something quite small and easy to achieve for the other person to feel successful in connecting to you and understanding you. So in this case, I might make a request. I'd like to ask you next time you have a sprint planning meeting to include me as optional or to send me the roadmap afterwards that you align on. Now, the other person doesn't have to meet my request. They might make a counter proposal, but the most important thing of this model and this conversation is that the other person understands what I'm going through and they don't feel reactive so that we can have a mutual conversation about what's going on.
Wow. This point about how when you're trying to convince someone of something, when something is going wrong, this point that your goal is not to convince them, that your goal is to have mutual understanding, that just blew my mind. I think it's going to change my life. Wow.
Lenny, try this with your wife tonight. NVC is a powerful tool. And actually, it's very akin to most models that are about connection. The Stanford Business School course that has it's called Touchy Feely that everybody loves.
We've had Carol on the podcast.
Great. Yeah. So Carol Robbins created this movement, right? There's LIT. A lot of founders go to her model that's for founders.
Leaders in tech. Yep.
And this is all about, they talk about a net, that you can talk about your feelings and your reaction. But as soon as you cross the net to blaming someone else or making an assumption, they're going to have a defensive response. But you can be incredibly bold and brave if you stay on your side of the net. So this model helps you do that because it's really about sharing your emotions and your needs and making a request without blame.
Yeah. So what I was going to say as you were going through this framework is it's here's me. Here's what I saw. Here's what I'm feeling. Here's what I need. And then now that you have that in context, here's something I'm asking for versus you did this and you're feeling this and you thought this.
Exactly. It also acknowledges that professionals have feelings. I think that we operate in tech like we're supposed to give all of ourselves, all of our time, all of our energy to this endeavor, and it's purely logical. That's not at all true. It's completely emotional. And if we ignore our feelings, they will bubble up and we will be unconsciously acting from them.
And there's kind of this implicit power here that if the person cares about you and loves you or values your relationship, knowing that this makes them feel bad will make them want to change. It's not like you need to tell them, change this thing. It's, oh, I didn't realize this made you upset or that you have this need. And now that I know that, okay, now I see why this is important to you.
That's exactly right. And sometimes the other person will hear that and have a different story or different perspective, right? So they might say, okay, I can honor that request, or I hear that request and I hear your feelings, but let me explain what happened for me. And one way you could do that is, are you open to hearing that? So they're able to share their side too. You don't have to just agree with the person's request. As long as you're setting this tone, the other person's more likely to contribute in a way that achieves mutual understanding, because they're going to share, once you're vulnerable, they're going to share their vulnerability.
Let me remind folks of the framework. I'm going to try using this. I wish it was a handy acronym.
I know.
Oftener. So the framework is share what you've observed, just the facts of what is happening. Just simply, I saw you didn't close the fridge fully.
Mm-hmm.
Your feelings of how that made you feel, the needs that your core human need that drives that feeling, I imagine. And then the request you have of the person.
Yes. And I want to make one note I forgot to say, which is feelings are emotions. So sometimes people say things like, I feel like you're being a jerk. That's not a feeling, obviously. A feeling is a sensation in your body that results in an emotion. So naming a feeling is actually not easy for technical leaders sometimes. I want to make that point because emotions are what get you to the underlying humanity of connection. Emotions are the key to soliciting empathy.
Are there like phrases that are just examples of non-feelings, like using the word you in the way you describe a feeling probably is not a good sign.
Exactly. If you can say like, I feel like, even if you add like, or I feel that, you're probably going to add a fact. It should be an emotion word after I feel.
So don't say like, don't say you, don't say that.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Sort of along this topic, I chatted with a number of clients that have worked with you over the years, and one of the most common themes that they said you help them with is having difficult conversations. And I think we covered actually much of this in what we just talked about, but I'm curious if there's any other advice you have for helping people have difficult conversations. Let me read a quote from one of your clients.
Oh, wow. I love this.
So she said, Rachel is exceptional at making difficult decisions clear and making it feel possible to get these decisions actualized. Mm-hmm. Is there anything more there because difficult conversations are difficult. How do we help people make them less difficult? Any tips?
Yeah. Well, first of all, difficult conversations makes you want to run away. The marketing on conflict is poor. So I want to reframe that. My belief is when we feel internally ambivalent, we have two inner parts at war. And there's something really beautiful and important to pay attention to. There's something to learn when we have ambivalence. When we are in conflict, something important is at stake. We care deeply about what we're building, about the person that's letting us down. So the reason it's hard is because there's such an emotional component to it. And there's something to learn from it. So first, I want leaders who are listening to think, this is hard because I have something to learn here and because it matters. So instead of avoiding it and running away, I'm going to lean into this moment. And I'm going to come out of it, not just having solved this dynamic and not just having said my piece, but having built a skill. The reason I focus on interpersonal dynamics is because the quality of our relationships determines the quality of our life. I really believe that. And if you cannot have conflict, you can't have healthy relationships. We are going to disagree with the people we love or care about or are building a business with. So first, I just want listeners to reframe ambivalence and interpersonal challenge to think of them as a growth opportunity. Second, there is always something that we're doing to contribute to the conflict, even if it feels like the other person's insane and is driving us crazy and we're the innocent party. So entering any conflict conversation with humility and curiosity about the other person's experience is critical to setting the table for a commitment to come out better and stronger. So no model, NVC or otherwise, can fix a person who's coming in rigid and full of blame. I really love the 15 Commitments to Conscious Leaders. I don't know if you know that book, but one of the concepts is about taking 100% responsibility, not being in the world of blame, being a victim or being a hero. And I see many leaders when they're in a challenging interpersonal conflict, being in victimhood, being in blame, or being in hero. I'm just going to do it for them and forget it. You know, they're having such a hard time getting this done. I'm just going to do it. Instead, take responsibility for your part. What is my piece in making this dynamic happen? And how can I address it?
That makes me think about Jerry Colonna was on the podcast, and he has this famous line that I've always remembered. How are you complicit in the creating the conditions that you claim you don't want?
Yes, I love that. Love that question.
And there's so many, like there's three parts to that whole question. I won't get into it, but what you're sharing here is think about that, figure out how, because your point is you're always somehow complicit in creating the issue you're complaining about, and use that to help kind of put down the defense of the person. Like, here's what I've contributed to this problem. Do you use the nonviolent communication framework? And I don't know, is that just a general way of trying to have difficult conversations, or is there not a framework?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great framework for when
Okay.
you want to go interact with someone around something that's not working for you. Like,
Okay, great.
I think typically a difficult conversation arises because some feelings are coming up for you and you have a need that's not being met.
Mhm.
And so that's the instigator to know, okay, I need to talk to this person. We need to clear this up. For example, I was working with a CEO whose co-founder was constantly undercutting his decisions and criticizing him. And there was something happening where they'd gone from being this great dynamic duo, fundraised, hired a few leaders, and then all of a sudden he was getting kind of daggers thrown at him all the time. And it was exhausting and frustrating and confusing. So that was a time where he used NVC to address what is happening here. And it turned out that the co-founder was really frustrated with how he was spending his time. He didn't want him to be off selling. He wanted him to be helping him with product vision. And they had a totally different conception of how the CEO should be spending his time.
Awesome. Just to remind folks of the NVC framework, because this is the thing that's hard in the moment. Like, oh, what should I be saying? Observe, feelings, needs, request.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a nonviolent communication book if folks are into the framework and want to check it out.
Right. People need a little, like, who is it you said when your client's tattooed, the vision he had on? Okay, let's just get some.
Maybe don't tattoo NVC. It doesn't have a good acronym, you know? You could just print it out and put it right next to your screen or something.
All right. No tattoos. I just want to highlight the first point you made in this answer of having difficult conversations. And then I have one more question for you.
Yeah.
Just this point about if there's something you're afraid of, that is a sign you should do that. There's a quote I often think of: the cave you fear contains the treasure you seek.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost, and the advice there is just the thing you're afraid of is a compass to the thing you should do, because there's something important there.
Yeah, it's like, what's important here? What do I have to learn here? Is a question you can ask yourself when you're avoiding something. I often see this in talent management situations. A CEO has an underperforming COO. They're avoiding a conversation because they keep getting let down, and actually they kind of know deep down this is not working out. They don't want to face it. It's too much work. They need to just keep plowing forward. And when we really take space to think about their feelings and needs, they realize, I asked them, would you enthusiastically rehire this person for the same role? Which is the question we always asked at Stripe. And when the answer is no to that, no matter how many difficult conversations you have, this is not going to work. So then you have to take action. And even engaging in the hard conversation and seeing what happens can lead you to the clarity that you need to take action on talent that's not working.
That is a really cool tip. I did not know Stripe operated that way. We had the CTO of Netflix on the podcast, Elizabeth Stone, and this is very much how they operate. They're always asking a question like that. The way you phrased it was, would I enthusiastically rehire this person for the same role?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. It's very clarifying because it's binary. People have a physical sense. Just like we talked about a full body yes before, you have a immediate reaction that is honest to that question, that provides clarity.
And the answer isn't, if it's no, it's not fire them. It's you need to do something about it. It could be talk to them about it, put them on a performance plan, put them in a different role, right? It doesn't mean like you have to fire them immediately. So it's not necessarily as scary as it sounds if you say no.
Yeah, I think that also it depends on the stage of business you're in. So I see a lot of companies build a leadership team, and then a year later, the size and stage of their business is dramatically different. And they start to realize, oh, the CFO that was really fine back then is now completely wrong. He should be the controller. Okay, great. So reckon with that. Like, recognize that in how you're interacting with your current CFO. Put out a search. Like, there's many things you can do that aren't firing someone, but in quickly scaling businesses, it's natural that the leadership team's job will change and that you'll have to make some evolution over time.
And I guess it's very important to highlight the importance of operating this way. If you're trying to build a really successful company, is that should be the bar, is if you would not enthusiastically rehire this person for this role. If you're trying to build something that's never been built before and build build a company that actually works out really well, you need to really only hire people around that are hitting that bar.
Yeah, my perspective, I talked at the beginning about how I'm obsessed with the human side of business building. And my belief is that talent and the environment that you put your talent in is everything. Yes, building a product in a business is about building something that users need. It's about product market fit and then the wave you're on. Timing is important, right? You're going to build a different size business if you're in a sector that's not growing than right now if you're in the middle of AI. True. You're riding a timing wave and you're solving a core need. But everything besides that is so human. It's about talent and it's about the environment that you put that talent in. So you need to create the conditions such that your talent can thrive.
Such a simple concept that I think people overlook is just everything you do is going to be the people that you have around you and the environment you create for them to operate. I think your point about when you're doing something difficult, just to close out this element, I love this idea that if it feels hard, think of it as a learning opportunity. I think anyone listening to this is like, oh, cool, I'm going to learn something. I'm going to get better. It's such a easier, more motivating way of approaching something that's difficult.
Yeah, and I want to make a distinction between that and what we talked about earlier, which was lean into your strengths. Because I don't believe people should suffer through the day grinding, doing work that's depleting. That's not a learning opportunity. Interpersonally, when you're avoiding something, it's because you care about something. Avoiding your emotions is what I want to encourage people against. We have to feel our feelings all the way through, be present to our feelings, and interact with others in a way that acknowledges our feelings. That's what I want to encourage. Because actually, that's not deadening, that's enlivening. And there's learning there.
A final area I want to spend a little time on is something that I've heard from everybody that you work with, which is the way that you help them operate. So you just talked about the importance of the people you hire and how the environment you create for them. And something that you help leaders do is create a very specific way of operating around a one-page plan and how that kind of trickles down and just makes everything at a company more effective. Talk about this one-page plan, how you recommend companies operate with this.
Yeah, thanks for asking that question. I think typically companies have complicated the process of aligning their vision, their strategy, their goals, and the way people behave with each other, their values, so that all of these things live in different places, are talked about to a different degree, resonate to employees differently. And if you asked anyone at the company, what are your top 3 priorities and how do they relate to the vision? It's not an easy answer. So the reason I like the one-page plan concept is it's simplifying. It's a way for the leadership team to come together and align around what are we doing here? What is our role in it? And how do we communicate it so that the whole company has clarity and knows how the work they're doing ladders up to our big picture vision that we're all committed to. So I actually got this idea of the one-page plan from Alpine investors. They do a one-page, they have something called the People First Operating Rhythm, and they've successfully implemented that at their portfolio companies. And I work in concert with Alpine, so I work with some of their portfolio CEOs to execute this rhythm. So it's not just about a one-page plan. It puts your vision and your values on the first column, your strategic intentions and your KPIs on the second column, your annual goals on the third, and your quarterly goals on the fourth. So that no matter what you're talking about in terms of what are we doing for the next year or the next quarter, how do we prioritize, it's always in tandem with your core KPIs, your strategy, and your vision. And I love how they instituted that with their portfolio, and I saw the power of it. They've collected some data that their portfolio companies that actually institute the People First Operating Rhythm result in higher returns. So they're very committed to this strategy. And after operating with CEOs in their rhythm, I took some of those ideas and started to help other founders and other leaders with some of the same concepts in my own way.
We're going to hopefully link to a template of this one-page plan.
Yeah,
okay,
sure.
Cool.
Happy to share.
Okay, so let's do that. And then what kind of impact do you see from companies starting to operate this way to motivate people to do this?
Yeah, what I see is clarity and alignment. And I also see more connection. So I want to name that it's not just about having a plan. It's about how you create it, how you reflect on it, and how you come together around it to celebrate wins. So in my opinion, a very under-attended to part of building a business is an operating rhythm. When do you come together to kick off the year and share your strategy and vision again and talk about the goals? When do you come together to reflect on what's working and not working? And how do you do that? And in what groups? And are you honest, or are you just kind of doing it as a quick exercise to move on to what's pressing? So just like I said in co-founder dynamics, a key is to step out of the dance floor and to get onto the balcony. Executive teams leading a complex business need time away from being in the business to work on the business. So around this one-page plan, the reason I like a rhythm is you can kick off the year with the plan. That's really simple, easy to understand. Everyone can have it accessible. And every quarter, you can get together to reflect what worked, what didn't work. I really like the question, what's an inconvenient truth? Air the things that need to be talked about, that no one's talking about because you're too busy. That's the power of combining a simple plan, whether it's one page or not, that aligns you from the top to the bottom, your vision all the way down to your quarterly goals, and a time where you stop, pause, discuss, reflect, have a little spacious energy. It's not unlike what you said about your own time. You are the executive team. You want a little bit of spacious time to tinker, reflect, create, and come back to the meaningful work you're doing more energized. And leadership teams need that too.
By the way, Alpine Investors, Graham Weaver, he was on the podcast.
I saw that.
I love that. Okay, final question. I want to take us to AI Corner before we get to a very exciting lightning round. I'm going to do kind of a tweaked version. Usually ask people just how has AI impacted their work and life. I guess that is the question here. Just how has AI changed, I guess, coaching as a coach, but also just from a client's perspective, how are people using AI to help them in their, I guess, life from a coaching perspective?
Yeah, it's a great question. So as a coach, I use AI in a couple key ways that I'm grateful for. One, I use granola, which I saw you give away to your listeners.
One free year of granola if you become an annual subscriber of Lenny's newsletter.
There you go. So I use granola to take notes in our session so I can be fully present with my clients, and I can give them a synthesis of what happened and the next steps they committed to after our session. I also use it, I put them in a folder for every client, and so I can look at insights across our work together. What are the deeper things that are happening? What are the patterns that are taking place? I have these in my head, but actually it's a great tool to see over time, oh yeah, we talked about that in our first session. Let's bring that back because that's what you're struggling with now. So it helps me create the kind of transformation that I want for all my clients. Secondly, I just use ChatGPT to help me plan my retreats. I run a women's organization and we have 8 retreats a year. And it's a great tool to think expansively about new activities once I've gotten the core objectives down and I have a bunch of ideas about what I want to do. It gives me new creative ideas. So I can put in, like, here's my objective, here's my goal, here's my audience, here's my last retreat that I ran. I kind of want 3 new ideas for this session. So it'll give me kind of creative energy that I otherwise would need to get together with other coaches to discuss. And I do that too. Finally, and I'm experimenting with AI in a way to support my clients between sessions. So I've gotten some feedback from my clients that they would like more interaction between our sessions. And they're always allowed to email me or text me. I'm available to them. But I think they want to be really respectful of my time. And so some people do reach out and ask me questions and other people wait for our session. So I'm curious about the future of coaching, how in between sessions, clients can get access to more of an AI support where the bot has all of their context, their development plan that we create at the beginning. So that's their goals for our work together, how they want to grow, some of my core frameworks and my beliefs and my training. And the granola notes from all of our sessions so that they can access between just some extra spot support. They're going into this conversation. How should they approach it? They're anxious about this team meeting. How can they make the most of it? More tactical support. I see personal coaching as still critical for what is your vision of your life? How do you want to shift your core behavior to align with that vision? But that AI can play a real helpful role in between on the tactics.
That is super cool. So that's something you already do where they have access to this kind of
It's
GPT.
something I'm building right now.
Building.
So
That
my
is-
clients don't have that yet.
Okay, that is great. That is a really good idea. It's not replacing coaching and therapists, let's say, but it's adding a lot more in between time where you could just talk to us based on everything you've talked about, all the frameworks that you use. That is extremely cool. All right, there's $1 billion company coming.
I don't want to build that.
It's not your zone of genius.
Exactly.
Rachel, is there anything else that you want to share or leave listeners with before we get to our very exciting lightning round?
What I want to share is that the world is getting more lonely. There's a lot of research on this, but it's also obvious in my coaching sessions that people feel more alienated from one another. And actually building businesses is an inherently human endeavor. So I'm a fan of this AI boom. I appreciate that we have more technology at our fingertips than ever before. But I want to encourage listeners to think of themselves as leaders who bring humans together to self-actualize, and that they have to actively overcome the default state, which is blind grind and loneliness. So I think this is a call to action for your listeners to connect with the people around them, lead healthier teams, create environments where connection is inevitable, and that they will have more fun and build better businesses because of that.
What a beautiful way to end it. With that, we've reached our very exciting lightning round. I've got 5 questions for you. Are you ready?
I am ready.
First question, what are 2 or 3 books that you find yourself recommending most to other people?
One of them I said before, the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leaders. And I love Designing Your Life by Bill Burnett.
I love that book too. People don't talk about that book enough.
Mm-hmm.
Next question, favorite recent movie or TV show you really enjoyed?
Oh God, I just went to K-pop Demon Hunters with my daughter. It's so embarrassing, but that's what we dress as for Halloween, like everyone else in the world.
I have not seen that. I hear everyone talking about it. I'm going to try to avoid it, I think. Next question, favorite product you have recently discovered that you really love? Could be an app, could be a gadget, could be clothes.
I really love Loom. I've been
Amazing.
recording trainings on Loom for some of my clients it's a scaled holding company. So I'm able to scale training in a really human connected way.
Do you have a favorite life motto that you often come back to in work or in life?
I have a quote that is on my desk and I love it. Ready? If you can see your path laid out in front of you, step by step, it's not your path. Your own path you make with every step you take. That's why it's your path. That's a Joseph Campbell quote.
Beautiful. Final question. You've got 2 kids, you said. Do you have any favorite children's books that you most love reading to them that they've loved most?
Oh my gosh. So my daughter is really into Roald Dahl. I love Roald Dahl because he's completely irreverent and he has a crazy imagination. So we've been reading Witches, Matilda, all of his books, and both my kids love it. So they're 5 and 7.
Have you seen the Wes Anderson stories of his stories? Where
Some of them, yeah, they're great.
Yeah, they're so amazing. Oh my God. And it's like Roald Dahl is like, I think it's personifying him like he's like a character in the story.
Yeah, I mean, he's a character from what I hear about his life.
Rachel, this was incredible. I feel like we've very much accomplished what I set out to do, is just give people all this advice that they never have access to, that costs tens of thousands of dollars. I think we're going to help a lot of people improve their lives and their careers. Thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
I almost forgot to ask you 2 final questions. Where can folks find you if they want to reach out, maybe consider working with you? And how can listeners be useful to you? Yeah,
find me at locketcoaching.com. And how can listeners be useful? listeners should turn towards each other, build great relationships, and send CEOs and co-founders my way if they need coaching.
Thank you so much for being here. There's been a lot of talk these days about AI not delivering on the promise that we hear, especially at enterprises.
These things take 6 to 12 months to get them truly robust enough where an important process can be automated. Like with any of these major tech revolutions, headlines tell one story, and then on the ground, laying broadband means you need to dig up every single road in America to lay it. Someone's got to dig up the road, or someone's got to run the undersea cable.
Is there anything you think people don't truly grasp or understand about where AI models are going to be in the next 2-3 years?
The general trend right now is going from models knowing things to models doing things. The next question becomes, what can it do for me? How does the agent make decisions for you?
Let's talk about scale and this whole world of AI that you're in. You essentially pioneered data labeling, training data, creating evals for labs.
18 months ago, you would get a short story and it would say, is this short story better than this short story? And now you're at a point where one task is building an entire website by one of the world's best web developers, or it is explaining some very nuanced topic on cancer to a model. These tasks now take hours of time and they require PhDs and professionals.
I've talked to a bunch of people that work with you over the years, and I heard a lot about just how high of a bar you set for new businesses.
From an entrepreneurship standpoint, it truly is about what insight do I have? Why am I so lucky to have this insight? Why, in a world of a million entrepreneurs who are thinking, who are smart, who are trying everything, why am I in the position where I likely have an insight that others do not?
Today, my guest is Jason Droege. Jason is the new CEO of Scale AI. This is the first interview that he's done since taking over for Alex Wang after the Meta deal. Alex now leads the super intelligence team at Meta. Prior to Scale, Jason co-founded a company with Travis Kalanick before he started Uber, worked at a couple startups. Most famously, Jason launched and led Uber Eats, which went from an idea that he and his team had to what is now a multi-billion-dollar run rate business, and one that basically saved Uber during the pandemic when nobody was taking rides. This interview is following a theme that I've been following through a bunch of interviews, which is the evolution of how AI models actually get smarter. Along with scaling compute and improving the actual model code, much of the improvements we're seeing in ChatGPT and Claude and every frontier AI model is these labs hiring experts to fill in gaps in their knowledge and correcting their understanding of how things work, and basically showing them what good looks like in every domain that consumers are using models. Scale was the pioneer in this space. They created the category. And in our conversation, we talk about what is happening at Scale and just how this deal with Meta worked, what experts like doctors and software engineers are specifically doing to help models get smarter, how the whole market of data labeling and evals and data training has changed from when Scale entered the market to today, and also just how long will we need humans to keep helping AI get smarter. We also get into where Jason sees models going in the next few years because they have such a unique glimpse into the future. We also talk about a ton of really unique and really important product lessons from the course of Jason's career, including a bunch of advice on how to start a new business, both startups and within existing companies, and also a bunch of advice on hiring and leadership and so much more. A huge thank you to Alan Penn and Stephen Chow for suggesting topics for this conversation. If you enjoy this podcast, don't forget to subscribe and follow it in your favorite podcasting app or YouTube. It helps tremendously. And if you become an annual subscriber of my newsletter, you get a year free of 15 incredible products, including Lovable, Replit, Bolt, N8, and Linear, Superhuman, Descript, Whisperflow, Gamma, Perplexity, Warp, Granola, Magic Patterns, Raycast, ChatPRD, and Mobbin. Head on over to lennysnewsletter.com and click Product Pass. With that, I bring you Jason Droege. This episode is brought to you by Merge. Product leaders hate building integrations. They're messy, they're slow to build, they're a huge drain on your roadmap. And they're definitely not why you got into product in the first place. Lucky for you, Merge is obsessed with integrations. With a single API, B2B SaaS companies embed Merge into their product and ship 220 plus customer-facing integrations in weeks, not quarters. Think of Merge like Plaid, but for everything B2B SaaS. Companies like Mistral AI, Ramp, and Drata use Merge to connect their customers' accounting, HR, ticketing, CRM, and file storage systems to power everything from automatic onboarding to AI-ready data pipelines. Even better, Merge now supports the secure deployment of connectors to AI agents with a new product so that you can safely power AI workflows with real customer data. If your product needs customer data from dozens of systems, Merge is the fastest, safest way to get it. Book and attend a meeting at merge.dev/Lenny, and they'll send you a $50 Amazon gift card. That's merge.dev/Lenny. This episode is brought to you by Figma, makers of Figma Make. When I was a PM at Airbnb, I still remember when Figma came out and how much it improved how we operated as a team. Suddenly, I could involve my whole team in the design process, give feedback on design concepts really quickly, and it just made the whole product development process so much more fun. But Figma never felt like it was for me. It was great for giving feedback on designs, but as a builder, I wanted to make stuff. That's why Figma built Figma Make. With just a few prompts, you can make any idea or design into a fully functional prototype or app that anyone can iterate on and validate with customers. Figma Make is a different kind of vibe coding tool. Because it's all in Figma, you can use your team's existing design building blocks, making it easy to create outputs that look good and feel real and are connected to how your team builds. Stop spending so much time telling people about your product vision and instead show it to them. Make code-backed prototypes and apps fast with Figma Make. Check it out at figma.com/Lenny. Jason, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
As I was researching your background and prepping for this podcast, I learned a really interesting fun fact about you that I don't think a lot of people know. So Travis Kalanick, he had a startup before Uber. It was called Scour. It was a peer-to-peer file sharing app. And then I think got shut down. You were his co-founder. This was the early part of your career. I'm guessing there are hours of stories we could talk about during this experience. So let me just ask you this one question. What's just a lesson that has stuck with you from that experience that you've taken with you to future places you've worked and built product at?
I mean, there's so many lessons. How I like to pick one. I think that like the main lesson is that in business and in startups, everything's negotiable. I think that's like the main thing because we were 19 at the time, 19, 20 at the time. We built this search engine in a dorm room and we were running it out of the dorm room. And our first URL was scour.cs.ucla.edu. And, you know, these things were like not necessarily infractions at the time, but we were just being practical. It was basically a project that we had started. And so we built the search engine and, you know, people started using it and we thought we would get in trouble. But it turned out the computer science department was excited about it, even though we had like basically parked a domain on their servers. And we were using our own computers in the dorms to serve up this website and product. And then when we got into financing, the financing process was fascinating. And this is where the sort of everything is negotiable lesson came from, which is it was Ron Burkle and Mike Ovitz were the initial investors in the business. We were in LA, so we were at UCLA. So we were not quite wired into the entire Sand Hill Road scene. And as we were doing the deal, the terms kept changing on us. You know, we thought you went and raised money, you know, and it was like, oh, we'll get a few $1 million at a $5 million valuation. This is back when like that was actually a Series A like valuation. And then over the course of the deal, it was like, we're doing the deal, we're not doing the deal. Oh, you should give us 50% of the company. Oh, you should give us 75% of the company. Oh, if you want to sign the document today, this person's going to show up for breakfast. And if you don't sign today and give us 80% of the company, the person's not going to show up. It was just like completely wild, the things that we saw from day one of what can happen in business. And we thought there was like a way to do things. And at a very young age, we realized there is no way to do things. There is just the way that you can negotiate your way through the world, which I actually think influenced Travis heavily and then me later heavily at Uber in terms of if you can imagine it and it makes sense and you can align incentives, then it can happen. But there is no like way. And to learn that at 19 or 20 years old, I think was highly imprinting.
That is an amazing lesson. What happened to Scour? It got shut down, I think. What happened there?
Well, yeah. So at the time, so basically what Scour was it was a multimedia search engine and then peer-to-peer file sharing network. But what it was used for was finding free content. And at the time, like the laws around this were pretty ambiguous because we weren't, you know, like mixtapes were legal, but this was like a hyper version of that. But we were eventually sued for $250 billion. So I guess if you're going to experience something that's potentially as life devastating as that, you know, doing it when you're I think we were 21 or 22 at the time, is the time to do it. But it was just like this like very, cold splash of water about how the real world really works. Because the MPAA and the RAAA were the ones who sued us, the entertainment industry sued us, or the associations that represent the entertainment industry. And then they settled it for $1 million. So we're like, wait, you wanted $250 billion and then you settled for $1 million. And of course, they were just trying to drive us into bankruptcy, drive us out of the market. And these are established companies. So we're like, if these guys don't have a playbook to follow, they just kind of make up numbers, then wow, like how should we navigate like the rest of our lives?
Let's talk about scale and this whole world of AI that you're in. This is the first interview that you're doing since taking over as CEO at Scale. I'm honored to have you here to talk through this stuff.
Yeah.
This is also the first interview you're doing since the whole Meta deal, which is very complicated, confused a lot of people. So I'm just curious to hear the current state of Scale, what people should know. For example, what's your relationship with Meta? What's your relationship with Alex? What is the current state of Scale?
Yeah. So Scale is a fully independent company. The transaction was Meta invested a little bit over $14 billion to get 49% of the company, non-voting stock. Didn't take a new board seat. Alex fills the board seat. So the board is the same. The governance is largely the same. There's no preferential access to anything that Meta has. There's no preferential relationship. I mean, we've had a long-standing relationship with Meta on the data side of the business for a long time. And even on some business development related things to, maybe work on things in government together, et cetera. And so those might get bigger just as we're closer now, but there's nothing that prevents us from doing things with other parties, and they have no access to anything that they wouldn't have had otherwise. Like all the privacy is still in place, all the data security is still in place that was there before. And in fact, only about 15 people went over in the transaction. So Scale has about 1,100 employees or so now. And we have two major businesses. Each of those businesses has, each of them is hundreds of millions of revenue. So we kind of have two unicorns inside the company today. That sustains. The business has grown every month since the deal happened, which I've read the reporting is not consistently reported. We haven't talked about it, right? So this is part of getting the word out. And, we're excited to continue to build, deliver data, and do what we did before.
Okay, so the company today, independent, its own company. Alex, just to be clear, he works at Meta now. He's no longer at Scale.
Yeah. That's right. Excuse me. I should have talked about that more. Yeah.
I think that's really interesting. So basically, it was an investment. Some people left to join Meta. The company continues. You're running the ship. Let's talk about this whole space that you guys essentially pioneered. I don't know the best way to call it: data labeling, training data, creating evals for labs. You guys were at this before anyone even knew this was a thing. I know even Scale pivoted into this market from other things. I think there was like a bunch of stuff they tried with self-driving cars and all these things. And then it's like, oh shit, AI labs need this data. One of the main stories I've been hearing is, and I've had a bunch of CEOs from this space on the podcast, is that there's been this big shift from what Scale had pioneered and had been doing for a long time, which is generalist, low-cost labor training. From that to now, labs mostly need experts, lawyers, doctors, engineers doing training, writing evals, things like that. I'm curious just what you're seeing, how that's impacting you guys, where you think things are heading, what people should know about this whole market of data training, data labeling.
Yeah, totally. I think the current positioning out there from competitors is just bogus. So I'll start with that, and then maybe talk a little bit about. I'll explain what I mean by that in a second, but I think it's important to just give 30 seconds on like what the history of Scale is and what's the thread going back to 2016. So Alex had this insight in very early days that the important thing to models was data. And I think he was 19 or 20 years old at the time as well. And so he's like, okay, well, what business would I create around this? And the business that he created around it was, okay, let's do labeling for autonomous vehicles. Because if you label the data that they have, the cars do better. And then that wave turned into the computer vision wave, which we have a relationship with the Department of Defense where we do labeling for them. And that was in 2020. And then he moved forward. And the models have gotten better over this period of time. And so as models get better, they need different types of data. So we've constantly been adapting to the type of data that models need to be successful. And so then the Gen AI wave hit, and this went through the moon, or to the moon. And so as part of that industry is changing constantly too. So it is correct that when the models came out 2 or 3 years ago, we remember using them. They would hallucinate all the time. They would get basic answers wrong. They didn't know which poem was better, this poem or that poem. And that was the state of labeling a couple of years ago. And things have changed quickly, and we've changed with it. And now the state for everyone, and we've been at the forefront of all of this, is expert data labeling, more sophisticated tasks. So to give you a sense of what the task was 18 months ago, I've been here about 13 months, so I was interviewing and I remember seeing it. You would get a short story and it would say, is this short story better than this short story? And then you would edit it and be like, yeah, it would be better if it was this. And you would give some preference ranking to it, right? It was pretty basic 18 months ago. And then you had the rise of some experts, but the models were so far behind that they needed just even the basic stuff they needed. And now you're at a point where one task is building an entire website by one of the world's best web developers, or it is explaining some very nuanced topic on cancer to a model. And these tasks now take hours of time and they require PhDs and professionals. So to give you a stat to back this up, 80% of the people that we have in our expert network have a bachelor's degree or greater, which is very contrary to some of the positioning that's out there and some of the understanding of this industry. About 15% have a PhD that's greater. And we have PhDs on the network earning like significant amounts of money doing labeling, contributing their expertise to these models. So we've been doing expert data labeling ever since the models need it. I mean, like this game is keeping in touch with the researchers, knowing what they need, coming up with ideas internally. In some ways, we drove this because we were seeing that the models were not sufficient in more expert ways. And so we would go to the model builders and say, hey, like we noticed that this is a problem. If you would like to fix it, like this cadre of experts can do that for you. So yeah, I like the counter positioning is out there, but I think that's just what competitors say sometimes. It has nothing to do with reality.
Okay, that was extremely interesting. So what I'm hearing is, yes, there has been a big shift to labs need more expert folks involved in training, labeling, writing evals. You guys are very aware of that and have evolved with that. One of the, allegations, I guess, in the market is that it's hard to find these experts. So all these companies have their proprietary network of experts and how they find them. Is there anything you could share about just how you guys go about that? Because that feels like the hardest part is finding these experts and keeping them from other companies.
They are hard to find. You have to have many, many tactics, right? So we get, as you would expect, there's not one way you do it. The largest way is that they refer each other because when you are enjoying what you're doing and you are using your expertise to contribute to AI, which is pretty cool. Like if you're a PhD on this like pretty specific topic and you're using a model and you're frustrated that, it doesn't interact with me in the way that I want. This is a paid way to have an outlet for that and to make hundreds or thousands of dollars doing that. And so a lot of times they refer each other. We also have campus programs where we will literally go onto the campus and talk to the professors, talk to the students, ask about, who would like to do this type of work. And then of course there's the more traditional scaled ways of like LinkedIn and, places like that. But the best ones come from these sort of grassroots and referral networks. And the only way you get that is providing a great experience to these people, because these people, like, they're doing it partly for money, but they're also doing it because they think that their contribution to the AI models is important and interesting. And many times it solves a problem for them.
So something that I've been seeing on Twitter just this week as I was preparing for this is there's this, the information headline. This came out and this mirrored something that Brendan from Workhorse said, that over time, the entire economy is going to move towards just reinforcement learning, and everyone's just training AI is basically the jobs that will be left. Thoughts on that? Is that where you think things are going? Is there another perspective?
Reinforcement learning is very important. And I think this is a broader comment about the move to environments. There's these things called RL environments that effectively are sandboxes for AI agents to play in to accomplish a goal so that they can learn how to accomplish that goal. We've been doing this for over a year. So for example, you have a Salesforce instance. How does an AI agent navigate that instance? That instance has data that it needs to recognize. It has configurations. Salesforce is a highly configurable product. Like, it has configurations it needs to understand how to navigate. You're asking the agent to do a business process that needs very high reliability. And then the agent needs to know, hey, if I can't accomplish what I'm going to accomplish, or I think if there's a low accuracy of what I'm about to accomplish, how do I pop it up to a human being for feedback so I can get guidance? All of those things need to be trained, and there's no alchemy to it. You just have to put the AI agent in an environment that represents what a human being would be doing. And you can imagine the number of environments in the world and the number of goals within each environment is enormous. So the question is, and the research that we have done over the past year to try to be a good partner to our model builders, our model builder customers, is how generalizable is each individual task or each individual environment. So if you imagine the world of like environments of like software systems, configurations, data types, sizes, user counts, complexities, it's like the permutations are endless. So what you need is a strategy that allows a lab to collect data that is generalizable enough across a broad spectrum of use cases so that they don't have to collect 45 trillion combinations of what should the agent do in this particular situation. So sometimes the work and the data is highly generalizable. And by generalizable, I mean you have it accomplish, in a simple way, the task might be find the meeting on my calendar for my interview with Lenny. And the agent goes and it looks through all my calendar and then it pops it out, right? Very simple example. Like, that needs to be generalizable to any calendar search potentially, or potentially any calendar action. And the more generalizable it is, the more valuable the data is. So our job is to provide the most valuable data to model builders that accomplishes the goal of making the agents as useful as possible for their end users.
I love that you've been sharing these examples of what the stuff is specifically that these people are doing in the data you're providing to labs. So just to mirror back a few of the examples you've shared, one is an engineer building a website, sharing the code essentially with the model, and here's how I would do it. And in that example, is it just like, here's the code, or is it like a recording of them building it? What is the data?
It could be it could be both. So in some cases, it's just the website, and here's like an example, and then they design it. In some cases, it needs to be annotated in such a way that's like, I made this decision for this reason, or this decision for that reason, or here's how I would think about it. So it depends on what the model builders are trying to accomplish. And so it can get quite nuanced in terms of what they're trying to train on.
Got it.
So, it's not like here's a website and then it's created doing websites. It's like, here's a website, here's why I made this decision, here's why I didn't make this decision, or here's a broken website and here's why it's broken, if they're trying to accomplish, a debugging tool for a website builder or something like that.
And another example you shared is a short story where it's like, here's one short story, here's another, I imagine generated by a model, and then it's like, which is better, and then how would you make it better? The other example you just shared is the Salesforce agent where it's like, hey, book a meeting with a prospect and then teach it how that happens. I love just how concrete these are, because it's like, okay, I get it. This is the stuff that these companies do. Is there another, maybe one or two examples just to give people a sense of what this data looks like?
Absolutely. I can actually give you an example from, so we have two sides of our business. One, we supply data to model builders, we sell the data. And then the other is we actually do solutions. We sell applications and services to healthcare systems, insurance systems, et cetera. I actually think it would paint a more colorful picture if I gave you an example of one of those, because it involves data, but it involves the use of data, the manipulation of data for a very, very specific goal. And so one example there is we work with a healthcare system, and health systems have lots of problems. This particular healthcare system has experts that see very rare cases on a regular basis. So you go there only if no one else can figure out your problem. And there's a huge backlog. So there's a productivity element to this implementation too. So there's a huge backlog. They want to be able to see more patients. They want to be able to provide better care, and they want to prevent the number of revisits because they want to give the accurate diagnosis day one and what the treatment should be. Well, to do this today, without the help of AI, the doctor really needs to read 200 to 300 pages of documentation, and it's rolled into one document, but in different formats. And so if you're a doctor, how are you going to read 200 or 300 pages of everything? So what they do is they do the best they can, right? They scan it. They ask a nurse to look at it. They ask maybe a more junior doctor to take a look at this case because they want to treat the patient well. Like obviously this is why they became a doctor. And then they go into the room and they talk to the person and then they make a diagnosis. Well, we basically built a tool that will read that document for them and point out the top 5 to 10 things that they should take into consideration. Either allergies that might not be obvious is one example where we picked up on an allergy that a patient had that would not have been obvious from reading the document. And that allergy actually would have had a conflict with the medication that they were going to be prescribed. And so the AI tool basically pulled out this correlation that would have even been hard for a human being to do. To make this tool better and better, you get to a certain limit with the models off the shelf. And actually the people inside of this healthcare system have to do their own labeling. So we talk about labeling for model builders, but we're starting to see the labeling move into enterprises and into governments, because you can only get so far with off-the-shelf plus RAG plus some fine-tuning based on recorded data. One thing people often miss about these systems is we assume, because you hear these numbers of like, oh, this bank ingests 200 petabytes of data a year, or whatever fantastical number. What we miss is it the right data? Which of that data is useful to the models? And most of it is not useful. Some of it is, but a lot of what we do when we're talking about knowledge work, when we're talking about making judgment, is human judgment based on synthesizing, like, how would this doctor in this case, or how would this banker in this case make this decision? And how would they make the decision in the context of their overall enterprise? And that might be different bank to bank, healthcare system to healthcare system, because of the culture, the objectives, the incentives, et cetera. And so we're getting to the point now where we see that digitizing judgment, human judgment, true subject matter, deep expertise is becoming a bottleneck that we're unblocking for our customers.
It's really interesting. It's like the spectrum went from just low skill, generalist labor to experts to now like the specific expert at this one company who needs to do this work, this labeling.
Absolutely. I mean, understanding what, there's this broad narrative, we kind of have two narratives. We have like the AGI, like everything's just going to become AGI. And then there's the skeptics, which is like, hey, this is all bunk, like this is a bubble, et cetera. And of course, my view is most things are kind of like there's truth in between, and some of the extreme parts of the extreme are probably correct. But, the reality is that it's very hard to get mission critical use cases in agentic systems where agents are talking to agents to a level of accuracy and that is necessary to accomplish a goal. And one of the main issues is that one document, like think about the problem of even understanding a document. Like a document that reads the exact same words in company A will have a different meaning and importance in company B. So how do you have a system that knows that? So this has all got to be built. So if you're going to make good decisions.
This is a good segue to this question that is always on people's minds when they look at companies like yours and the other folks in the space, is just how long do we need people to be doing this? Like at what point will AI be smart enough to do it themselves? I know your incentives are to say we will never run out of people because it's aligned with your growth, but just how should we think about just like, why do we need people, I don't know, in 10 years? Like how long do we need these experts telling AI things it doesn't know?
First off, the history of data labeling is a history of new beginnings, right? Like autonomous vehicles do not need as much data labeling as they did in the past. So the company, Scale is a company that believes that data will always be important. At the point at which you don't need external data, human data in models, I think we've gotten to a level of advancement in the world that is almost like unfathomable, because you're effectively saying that like no new human skill and no new human knowledge is important enough to put into these models. That feels like pretty far out there. And so, for a business like ours, we're constantly looking at how do you build operations that can constantly find the new needs and then work with the contributor network. We call the experts contributors to unearth that data, to unearth that information. And sometimes it's new people. Sometimes within our existing base, we find that existing people have expertise that we didn't know about, that maybe wasn't useful to a model a year ago, but now is useful. So, this is a constant progression of getting more and more data into these models. Yeah, yes, we are financially incentivized to believe that humans will always be in the loop, but that's not just a business belief. It is a personal belief. Like, these systems need to work for us. And if these systems work for us, then we will need to be on the loop or in the loop on any of the decisions that these systems make. As to the broader point around labor, which I think comes up around white collar apocalypse and these things that kind of come up, I'm definitely on the more maybe practical side of this, possibly just because of my nature, possibly because I see what's going on the ground actually in these customers where supposedly this transformation is going to happen in the next 1 to 2 years. And I just think that it might happen. The space is moving super fast, but I don't think it's going to happen. It's definitely not going to happen in the next year. The idea that it happens in the next 2 years, I think, is very far-fetched, but nothing's impossible here. And long term, I think that if you go back through, I don't know, Pessimist Archive or whatever these accounts that post the radio was invented, and then all of this will be eliminated. There will be change, but the change, I think humans are very good at adapting. So I think what we're underestimating in all of the doom and gloom is we believe in human adaptability. We as a company are highly adaptable. And I think the history of technology has shown that people are adaptable.
I really like that takeaway. I'm an optimist as well, so I'm always looking for reasons to be optimistic. I want to follow that thread, but before I get there, something very tactical I want to ask about is evals seem to be coming up a lot, especially with companies in your space. I'm still learning a lot about just what this all is, especially in your market. How much of what your experts are providing are evals versus other types of data?
Yeah, a lot of it's evals. And within enterprise customers and government customers, it's mostly evals because somebody's got to establish the benchmark for what good looks like. That's the simple way to think about evals. What does good look like? And you have a comprehensive set of evals so that the system knows what good looks like. It's as simple as that.
So in the case maybe of the healthcare example you shared, essentially this doctor would be sitting there looking at all these reports, creating evals that are this is what this should be discovering in this report, in this record. Is that a way to think about it?
Yeah. That's a very big part of it, which is what does good look like?
Awesome. Okay.
I have to reduce things down to simple terms.
Yeah. It's interesting to say good versus correct. Is that a specific term you like to use, good versus just this is the correct answer?
I didn't intentionally use that word, but these are probabilistic systems. And so, depending upon, so I can get into some nuance here about the right types of problems that AI is good at solving. So if you have a human process that is 10 or 20% accurate or 10 or 20% liked, AI is awesome because it can get you, if you get to 50, 60, 70, 80% accurate, you're in the money, you're in the green. Everybody's happy. Now the system then has to know, hey, for the remainder, how do I make sure that humans are involved for the remainder of the decision making? But from a net value add standpoint, the humans are pumped in that scenario. If you have a human process, a workflow that is 98% accurate, and you expect an AI system to get you the remaining 2%, not totally there yet. And so when I say what does good look like, a lot of the processes and a lot of the things that people are asking these systems to do and systems for us to build are making judgments on their behalf. And so just like we would ask a human being, hey, what do you think we should do in this scenario? What you're looking for is you're looking for the best recommendation or course of action given the current information.
To you, this is so obvious, and to people in your market that I think a lot of people think about AI being trained on just here's a bunch of data, check it out, learn everything you can from all of human history and all of written record. But what's wild is basically people are sitting around teaching AI things it doesn't know, filling gaps. That's how AI is getting smarter now. There's no more real data for it to feed on. It's just here's what I don't know. Okay. Or here's what an expert found. You're wrong. I'm going to teach you this. And the fact that it scales and that's what's keeping models improving is so mind-boggling.
Yes. No, I agree. I mean, with any of these major tech revolutions, the headlines tell one story and then on the ground, laying broadband means you need to dig up every single road in America to lay it. Like there is the like, yeah, it's as simple as that. Someone's got to dig up the road, or someone's got to like run the undersea cable. Like there's always some operational chiseling that's going on in all of these industries. I mean, if you think about how magical these models are, I mean, they're remarkable. That like, if you've been in technology long enough, it's like, it blows my mind even today that they get the punctuation right consistently. I mean, that sounds like almost daft to say, like at this point in the market, but if you were to go back 3 years and think about that from a technological standpoint, like I think like a lot of things that we think are trivial now are very sophisticated. And it's a combination of, I mean, like the real answer is it's a combination of computational power, model improvement, and data. And all three are getting better at once.
Let's follow that thread. You've been at Scale for a long time, CEO for, you said 13 months. I feel like you see a lot more about where things are heading because you work with labs on things they haven't even announced yet. You see more than most people. And I know there's only so much you can share about what companies are doing, but just, is there anything you think people don't truly grasp or understand about where AI models are going to be in the next 2-3 years?
Look, there's so much talk. Yeah, I think it depends on how much X or news you consume. So I think it's like, what's sort of our perspective? The general trend right now is going from models knowing things to models doing things. And, we're pushing the boundaries of knowledge, like the benchmarks that we put out and that others put out are showing that the knowledge that these models have it's quite robust. And then the next question becomes, well, what can it do for me? And as soon as you get into that world, that's where the environments we were talking about start to come into play. How do you navigate a Salesforce instance? How do you navigate a healthcare system? How do you navigate even like a weather app on your phone? And how does the agent make decisions for you? We're just getting into the beginning of that. It'll be very interesting to see how quickly that happens. And I think that's where a lot of the speculation has a wide variance because we're at the beginning of it. People take different trajectories on like how that's going to improve. And so if you take a trajectory of like the most aggressive trajectory, which is like, oh, it's actually going to be quite easy to train on these things. And then it's just a change management exercise in the economy, which by the way, change management exercises are not to be underestimated. Like, there's still people in the world without an email address. And so the adoption curve then becomes like a human and policy issue, not a technological issue. We're not there from the technology standpoint. But I do think in the next 2 to 3 years, if I, take the bait and like have to make a guess, is the technology will get to a point where it will push the change management and policy makers to say like, ooh, what do we do with this? Because it's getting pretty close. That's probably 2 or 3 years away.
There's been a lot of talk these days about AI not delivering on the promise that we hear, especially at enterprises. There's this like MIT study that just showed that there's all these pilots that people are excited about and then they don't work. And companies aren't adopting these tools. There's data showing engineers are not actually as productive with tools, like it actually slows them down sometimes. You work with a ton of companies implementing all kinds of AI. What are you seeing on the ground? What kind of gains are you seeing? Do you feel like it's overhyped, underhyped?
There's a lot of hype out there. And our job is to actually build products that work, that deliver value for our customers and figure out where the rubber hits the road. And to get a sophisticated, My Health Her example is one. We do other sophisticated workflows, claims management for insurance companies, right? This is a financial decision that's happening, but it's an automatable process. But basically what happens is the POCs get to like 60 or 70% of the way there, and the human mind goes, oh, the rest is no big deal. But it's kind of like uptime in data centers where like every 9 is like, an order of magnitude investment, in terms of like reliability, backups, et cetera. 1.9 is like basically, a web server in a dorm room like we had at UCLA, and then 5.9 is like this crazy like high bar, but it just seems like a very small movement. So you kind of have a similar dynamic going on here where you have a bunch of people, one of the reasons why the POCs have failed, one, there's a denominator effect because it's so easy to do. Hey, I spun up a project. So like, it's really easy for people to try. So I don't necessarily know that like the 95% number I think is a bit of like clickbait in a way. It tells the right story, but it is a little bit hyperbolic because if you take the efforts that happen in the company where they actually get a quality partner like we are, if you get or if you do it yourself, if you have engineers who've worked with models before and they put in the time, and I'm talking about like months, not like minutes, like you see in these videos, to actually get legal approval, policy approval, regulatory approval, change management, like an accuracy that everybody's comfortable with. If you actually do that, these things take 6 to 12 months to get them truly, robust enough where like an important process can be automated. So I think that's where like the hype is right, that when you do it, the impact is like, whoa, like I never would have figured that out myself. And I'm one of the most educated doctors in the world, as an example. But the time to get there is just longer than what people are selling.
It's such a good point that it's not only is it easy to try these things, it's just like everyone's doing it. So everyone's feeling FOMO, like I got to try these things. I got to try all these prototyping tools, Cursor, all these things, just because everyone's doing it. And then you just rush into it and it doesn't actually work out.
Yeah. Easy to learn, hard to master. That's my summary.
Yeah. This episode is brought to you by Mercury. I've been banking with Mercury for years. And honestly, I can't imagine banking any other way at this point. I switched from Chase and holy moly, what a difference. Sending wires, tracking spend, giving people on my team access to move money around. So freaking easy. Where most traditional banking websites and apps are clunky and hard to use, Mercury is meticulously designed to be an intuitive and simple experience. And Mercury brings all the ways that you use money into a single product, including credit cards, invoicing, bill pay, reimbursements for your teammates, and capital. Whether you're a funded tech startup looking for ways to pay contractors and earn yield on your idle cash, or an agency that needs to invoice customers and keep them current, or an e-commerce brand that needs to stay on top of cash flow and access capital, Mercury can be tailored to help your business perform at its highest level. See what over 200,000 entrepreneurs love about Mercury. Visit mercury.com to apply online in 10 minutes. Mercury is a fintech, not a bank. Banking services provided through Mercury's FDIC-insured partner banks. For more details, check out the show notes. Okay, let's move on from AI. This could be an endless discussion about AI, but you've got a lot more lessons to teach us. You've helped build Uber Eats. You've had a couple startups in the past. We talked about Scour for a bit. I've talked to a bunch of people that work with you over the years, and I got a lot of really interesting insights into the stuff that you're extremely good at. So I'm just going to kind of go through a bunch of these. One is your obsession with being close to customers, talking to customers. And I love this topic because it's something everybody thinks they are great at. And they feel like they completely understand how this is important, why this is important. They all feel like, I'm doing this. Don't worry about it. Everyone else is not doing this, but I am. Talk about just what you think maybe people miss about how this looks when you're doing it well, and just why this is so important.
I mean, I probably fall in the category of what you just described, which is maybe like, maybe part of the hubris you need to start anything new. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's like a clean process. I think my process is I'm constantly questioning every single thing that I'm hearing at the beginning of anything. I don't take what a customer says like literally. And there's been a lot talked about on this topic from like a product management standpoint in terms of like, oh, don't do what they say, do what they mean, and look at the real problems and underlying things. I think the way that I look at it that may be additive to the discussion is I look at the underlying incentives of the customer. And the underlying incentives of customers are not always financial. Sometimes it's ego. Sometimes it's career growth, right? If you're selling enterprise software to someone, there's an executive sponsor as an example. That person needs to trust that like you're going to do a good job for them. How do you get them to jump with you on this like big project? Well, that's part of the journey of like, not just the product, but what do they need to hear from us? What do we need to supply them? What do we need to do to actually unlock the opportunity to implement the product? So I think there's like an incentives alignment baseline. Like I'm a big believer that like, it's cliche, but show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. I think that's absolutely true. And even when customers will tell you things, like I'll give you an example. I've been out of the game for a while, so I can be open about it. Uber Eats. So when we launched Uber Eats, I looked at the business, in terms of being close to the customer, we actually couldn't get a restaurateur. I knew nothing about this industry. So at Uber, my job was to figure out what other businesses we should get into. And so we looked at 1 billion businesses, and Uber Eats, like food delivery was the one that we thought was most interesting, which turned out to be right. So good for us.
Very right.
And we couldn't get a restaurateur to help us understand their unit economics. And, they'd say like, oh, it'd be this percentage or that percentage, or why do you want to know? And then we go to a different restaurateur and they would kind of explain it, but they were a little suspicious of like, why are these Uber guys talking to me about, like how much my ham costs? And so what we did is we ordered just a bunch of food from these places. And then we got a restaurant supplier to give us like a base catalog. And we just matched up like, how much does the ham weigh? How much does the cheese weigh? How much does the bread weigh? How many pieces of lettuce are on there? And we tried to actually just compose our own independent view of like, what's the ingredients cost versus what's the labor cost? And then we sort of triangulated like, what was our ground truth? And then what are we being told by restaurateurs? And then what is like the zeitgeist telling us about restaurant economics? And if those things like all overlap, then we're like, okay, we have an insight about what to do here. And how does this relate to Uber Eats? Well, what we found as part of this is that roughly a restaurant pays 20 to 30% of every meal to ingredients. And they pay roughly 20% or 30% to labor. And they pay roughly 10% to real estate and a bunch of other, so kind of goes on the chain. But the important parts is what's the value of incrementality? And so we came in and we said, we're going to charge you 30% of the bill. And they were like, oh my God, is this Groupon all over again? This is way too high. Oh my gosh. And we explained the economics to them. And they were like, okay, we'll give it a try, but this is way too high. And they were right. The real number, the real clearing prices are on 25%, but we weren't that far off. And so when you go to find like product market fit or, be close to the customers, it's a combination of like, what's the most valuable thing? Well, in a restaurateur's case, give me incremental demand. Because if you were to take a restaurant location and triple demand based on the same labor, the same ingredients, the same labor, but you're just scaling ingredients, you've got a 70 to 80% incremental gross margin product. Restaurateurs would hate when we would say this because it doesn't work out exactly like that in reality. But like, because we had that insight, we had confidence that we could go to market with, we need to charge you this so that the delivery fee can be that. And then if the delivery fee is that and we charge you this, then we think the consumers will adopt. And that's what you need to get your incremental demand. So, and then we could pay the driver this. And so you kind of fit this whole puzzle together without totally satisfying any, in the case of a marketplace, you're not totally satisfying any individuals like 100% of their needs. What you're satisfying is like, you're getting a clearing rate for them to participate in the market in the case of a marketplace. So that's like one example.
Yeah, I love this example as you figure out how to help them with something they don't even fully themselves know yet. So it's you think through their goals for them, like as if you were them, break down the economics, and then here's the solution versus, hey, what can we do for you guys?
Yeah. I mean, if you walked into a restaurant, they would tell you a bunch of things. They would say, oh, labor scheduling is like an issue. They would say, my rent is an issue. They would say all these, my ingredients prices are an issue. That's 20 or 30%. If you could shave off 3% of that, that would be huge. You might then take that and go, I'm going to go build a business that's going to save you 10% of your ingredients cost. Well, but that doesn't actually get into their head on like what's truly important day to day. That might be important for them on an annual basis, but on a daily basis, what are they doing? They're looking at their numbers. They're looking, did people show up? Did I make money yesterday? Am I going to make money tomorrow? So like the urgency, I think the biggest thing people miss when they're building new products is the urgency of the buyer part of it. You can build something that provides a lot of value, but if it's not the top thing that the customer is thinking about in their busy days, then you're just going to have a long road to a small town.
This touches on just a theme I heard a lot about you, this idea of independent thinking and how much you value that. And this feels like a really good example of that. Is there anything else along those lines of just like why this way of thinking is so critical?
I think as a founder's job, and I mean, I stretch that term because at Uber, we had all of the benefits of Uber. So I wasn't really a founder. I just sort of started the business there. But there are some elements of founding there. Is you're looking for alpha in the market. Like when we started our first company in 97, it wasn't that cool. Like it might've been cool in Silicon Valley, but it was definitely not cool in LA. Now it's super cool to start a business. So as a result, everyone's kind of trying everything. So how do you get alpha on that market? If your research is highly influenced by what the world is saying around you, you're not going to have an independent insight. Like you kind of have to go off and do your own thing. And this is why, from an entrepreneurship standpoint, I have very strong feelings about like what the approach to founding a company should be. And it's probably very particular to me, but it truly is about what insight do I have? Because like, why am I so lucky to have this insight? Why, in a world of like a million entrepreneurs who are thinking, who are smart, who are trying everything, why am I in the position where I likely have an insight that others do not? And then why am I the one to do it? And like, the answer might be, I'm in this narrow, far-flung place. The other answer might be like, I am inherently a contrarian personality type. So I'm just constantly looking for the thing that's true that people don't believe is true, which sometimes works. But then the second part of that's super important, which is like, why do I want to work on this problem for 5 to 10 years? And like, people get this wrong all the time. They go and talk to a customer and they go, they have a problem, I'm going to go solve it. And it's just like not a great way to like start a business. Like, you really have to have this burning desire to constantly be questioning yourself. The other thing about independent thinking is that you can't fall in love with your ideas. And I do not proclaim to be the world's greatest independent thinker for what it's worth. This is what you've been told. But is just like part of that is basically throwing away who you are, who you've been, all your ideas for the mission that you're on, which is like trying to accomplish something for a customer.
This is great. I'm glad you went here. This touches on the other theme I heard often about you, is just how high of a bar you set for new businesses. And I think this advice is useful both for founders, as you said, and also people starting companies within companies, new business lines. So you've talked about this a bit already, but is there anything more there, just how high that bar needs to be for it to likely work out when you're starting something new?
Look, if you want to give yourself the best chance, and this isn't always how it works, but if you're like in my position, 25 plus years in their career, if you want to give yourself the best chance, I think there's 2 ways that companies end up working out. And the first way, which is probably the most important, quite frankly, is that the founder is just a force of nature over a long duration of time, because you're going to have to pivot. You have to have that energy to pivot. You have to go years and years and years with it being hard. And that's probably the most important thing. But the second most important thing is that you can easily educate yourself on like, what are good business models? What are bad business models? What are good markets? What are bad markets? And even if you're this force of nature, having the knowledge, if you're going to go into a bad market with all your energy, you should at least know. Maybe ignorance is bliss because you just throw yourself into it and it just kind of works out with time. But like, that's not how I would operate, which is marketplaces are good businesses. SaaS, at least historically, we'll see how this changes, but like SaaS historically, great businesses, recurring revenue businesses, sticky businesses, network effect businesses. And if you look at what the top VCs invest in, yes, there is a lot of like portfolio building, but there are similarities in terms of the types of business models that they believe could be worth tens of billions of dollars. And they have network effects. They have lock-in. They are more valuable at scale than a big scale than low scale. So if you just take a filter on a new business, this is what I did at Uber, which is like, if you just have a filtering mechanism on a new business, it doesn't take that long to eliminate the bad ideas. And then like, of what's left, you can pick, oh, I'm very passionate about this, even though it might have more problems than this other thing that on paper looks better. And then you have to have passion about it. But yeah, like, I think people just miss like a basic understanding of like what businesses even have a chance of being worth $100 billion.
So you launched Uber Eats, you figured out this is the place to go and bet. As an outsider, feels obvious. Of course, this is going to be a massive success. Of course, food delivery, such a good idea. I know you looked at a ton of ideas in that process. Can you just talk about what you explored and why you ended up picking Uber Eats?
I am definitely not the smartest person in the room when it comes to like figuring these things out. And so I keep a very, very wide aperture on ideas for as long as I can until I'm like, okay, everything is coalescing. And I think there's a bunch of reasons why you have to keep an open aperture on considering ideas that might seem bad at the start, but you just keep digging and see if you're right that they're bad or you're wrong. So just as a general philosophical principle, I'll start there. We looked at, we did some crazy stuff. We put, like I went walking around San Francisco one day and I looked down Market Street and there was like a CVS, a 7-Eleven, a CVS, a Walgreens, a 7-Eleven. And I'm like, how many SKUs could possibly be inside one of these things that people want? And couldn't you just put that into a van and like, you hit the button on the van and the van comes around and you get whatever convenience items you have and they're convenience items. So like, why would that be a problem? And we launched that in DC. We put like 10 of these trucks on the road. We put like 250 SKUs in them. And I mean, crickets is an understatement of how bad it was. I mean, we couldn't get an order to save our lives. And what we realized was that we hadn't really done the research on what convenience stores really were. It was, if you didn't have cigarettes, you didn't have beer, you didn't have Slurpees, you didn't have these things. Like, for example, like you didn't bring people in to sell all the other things. So we didn't know anything about retail. We were clueless. So that's like one idea. We looked at grocery, but honestly, the unit economics just terrified me of like all the pick packing and everything like that. I think Instacart did a remarkably good job at getting the unit economics to a good spot, and like probably the hardest operational problem you could tackle. We did generalized delivery, like point-to-point delivery. What's now, I forget what Uber's product is called, but like Uber Direct, I think it's called, where you have something that needs to go point-to-point in a city. That was kind of a flop from the beginning, because the truth is like how consumers don't really have this needs. Business sort of have this need. And in 2014, when we were doing this, no one had this need. So, but like we tried like 15 versions of all these things before we eventually just said, okay, the food delivery thing is just popping off on all signals, and we can make the unit economics work. People seem to want it. It's a super cool problem because we can like enable independent restaurants with like all these tools and allow them to compete with the big guys. We can take the real estate out of the equation. So you can have a real estate location that's non-prime, but if you have prime food, then you get to compete. So we're like, oh, this is a very interesting problem, and we can really help local economies.
And this ended up being, if I remember correctly, this basically saved Uber during COVID. Lyft didn't have something like this. And how big is this business at this point? Anything you share about just how important this turned out to be for Uber?
Yeah, of course. Well, we launched it in December of 2015 in Toronto. And within like 2 hours, we had done like $20,000 for the sales. It was crazy how quickly we saw that it was the right idea. And the unit economics were good. And then 4.5 years later, I was at Uber for about 6 years, but it took us about 1.5 years to figure this out. 4.5 years later, it was about $20 billion. So 0 to 20 billion in 4.5 years, which is pretty good. Uber was very good at scaling things, but competitive market, others did well. We beat a lot of people. Some people beat us. And then now I think it's pushing 80 billion. And that's been for another 4.5 years since I left. I think COVID turned it from 20. I left right before COVID, total coincidence. 20 to 50 in like a year. So yeah, I mean, ride sharing went this, and food delivery just went like to Pluto.
What luck. Well done.
Luck is part of the game. That's the other thing that's important to realize. Luck is part of the game. So do not begrudge people for luck. Like, this industry is hard. All these things we're doing are really, really hard. Luck is just part of the game.
One of your, maybe speaking that, maybe not, one of your colleagues, Stephen Chow, who I'm an investor in his new company, he worked with you at Uber Eats for a long time.
Yeah,
he told me to ask you about the McDonald's story. I imagine that was just a big milestone, a big moment enough for you guys. So why'd you decide to put McDonald's on Uber Eats? And there's apparently a story of how you won that deal.
Yeah, so it was kind of interesting. And this just goes to maybe like where sometimes ignorance leads you to accidentally the right answer. So we had launched Uber Eats, and Uber had a global footprint, and we were the only food delivery network with a global footprint, excluding China. And so everything at Uber needed to be launched globally. That was a very big part of the culture, et cetera. So which is a lot of work, and you can spread yourself too thin and cause other problems. But in this way, it was good. And so my vision was, okay, let's help the little guy compete with all these chains. They have these systematized food systems, and like food is what makes a city amazing. And no one talks about the chain restaurant that they visited in Paris. They talk about the local place that they found, and like, let's be part of that. That's who we want to be. And so McDonald's actually approached us, and they said, "Hey, we'd love to do food delivery with you." And I said, "No." And they're like, "Hold on a second. Like, we have like 80 million consumers a day. Like, we don't want to do this together." I'm like, it's not really like our vibe right now. And so I pushed them off for like 4 or 5 months until my team is like, "You're insane. Like, these people are going to put marketing behind it. They really want to do this. They want to lean in." So we actually had because of that, I think it's hard to correlate these things. Like, we ended up with this exclusive relationship with them, got an insane number of customers. Of chains at this point actually weren't really on food delivery networks because everybody was so worried about the unit economics because they're so sensitive to the basket size. And my approach was like, figure it out, right? Which is a very Uber culture thing. Like, okay, the basket's $17. It's our job to make that work, reduce the radius on the delivery, figure out the economics, maybe mark up some of the food some places. Like, there's always a way to figure it out. So we did it. And then, 3 months later, the business just like started hockey sticking again at like a different level. And my team is just like, dude, you were so stubborn on this point. But I think it actually ended up being a net benefit because we got a great deal with them.
So the fact that you pushed them out helped you get a better deal is what I'm hearing. That's amazing.
Yeah, I think that's the story he would be referencing. And then the onboarding of it was crazy because, we basically went global with them in like 6 months. And at this point, the business was less than 2 years old. So, activating this, I don't even know, 80-year-old company that expects processes to be in place. And we have like 2 of our ops managers in New York managing it. It was just mayhem.
I'm still sat in and out. I'm still not on any of these apps.
Yeah, me too.
I remember someone was hacking it. There's all these ways people found a way around it. And they're like, no, okay, you're Postmates. We know we're not going to give you any food.
Yes, love in and out.
You've touched on this idea of gross margins and margins, how obsessed you are with this. I wanted to spend a little time on here. I think I've heard just you're obsessed with understanding gross margins before going in on anything. Most founders have no idea what they're doing here. What have you learned about just what people should be paying attention to, what they might be forgetting when they think about just the feasibility of a business?
Yeah, look, it's one filter like many filters. There are certainly businesses that have low gross margins that are great businesses. Costco, Walmart, et cetera. Amazon talks about this all the time. Like there's companies that increase prices and there's companies that lower prices. But I would say that by and large, high gross margins combined with healthy churn curves are a very healthy sign for the business. I mean, think about it. Like if I were to sell you something and I can't mark it up a lot, how much value am I adding beyond what's in my hand? And if I'm not adding that much value, then what am I in the business of doing? And I'm in business of adding value. And it's not quite that simple, right? This is just a litmus test of like when someone comes to me and they go, especially in a new business, and we deal with this. I dealt with this at Uber. I've dealt with it everywhere. Someone comes up with an idea and they go, we can get into this business and I think we can charge this and it will get us to a 40% gross margin. And then my next question is, start at a 60% gross margin. Why does that not work? And they go, oh, well, the customer, and immediately you short circuit to like what the real problem is. Oh, the customer has an alternative. Oh, okay. Well, who's the alternative? Oh, it's some offshoring company. Well, what's their gross margin? Oh, we don't know. You go find out. It's like 20%. And they've been around for a long time and they have scaled operations. And you're like, okay, so like your gross margin is going to go from 40 to 20 quicker than you think. And you're going to be in a world of hurt unless you do something to differentiate. So I take gross margin as just like a very coarse instrument, not a perfect instrument, to think about, am I adding enough value? Am I differentiated? It's not perfect, but it's like a very quick short circuit filter to like, even to see if someone's pitching you an idea, have they thought through this dynamic? Because if the response is, yeah, gross margin's super low right now, but here's the dynamic I'm going after. And then you're like, oh, okay. And sometimes it's like, we'll just make it up with volume and then the gross margin will go negative for a while. And you're like, wait, this doesn't work.
So what I love about this is just a lens into, is my idea good enough? If studying, can I keep a high gross margin? Is there a reason why people in this space haven't been able to have a higher margin?
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, it's meant to disqualify, like, just like, you're doing these larger companies and everybody has ideas. And so you just, it's like, it's a way to cut through, like, do you understand like the machine that is going to need to be in place in 2 or 3 years? Like you might have a 70% gross margin now because the next question is why can't someone else do this? And if you have an answer of like, well, they can now, but they can't in 2 years if we run really fast, okay, we might have something. If they can now and they will be able to in 2 years, you're going to have margin compression.
Along these lines, I was just listening to I think it was the AC16Z podcast. Alex Rampell, I think, was sharing this story about Costco, how, as you said, their strategy is actually to keep margins very, very low because all their revenue comes from their membership. So they have something like 50 million members, paying $100 a month, and that's their entire business. And so they don't plan and they don't want to make money off the products.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, they're playing a slightly different game. Not an expert on Costco. Have spent some time with the company, but like they use price as a way to get to scale, right? And so they're basically saying, if we discount, same with Walmart, right? Like we will get so much volume that we will just take the air out of the room for all of our competition. And so then the question of, okay, so if you have a low gross margin today, in 2 or 3 years, once you land one of these centers in a market, like, why won't your margins get eroded? The answer is because we will have already absorbed like all of the demand. Like you try to go to 8% versus 10% gross margin, which I roughly think is what their gross margin is. Like, that's going to be a really hard business if you already have a habit with a customer. They have already built their weekly trips around you. You already have relationships with suppliers. You already have general managers that like know how to stock inventory. That's not a straightforward exercise. So they are like first to scale, and then good luck competing with them.
Okay, just a couple more questions. One is there's this term that I've heard that you often say and believe in, is this idea of not losing as a precursor to winning.
Yes.
Talk about that.
Tech is a culture where portfolios are built by investors, and a lot of the narrative is controlled by investors, frankly. Founders obviously participate, but this idea that you should just go for it is consensus. Just go for it. Who cares? Well, I don't know. If it's my life and I only have one moment every, to like take a shot, I might want to just not just go for it. Like I might want to think for a little bit. And I think the best entrepreneurs, I have no data to back this up, but just these are my friends. This is my friend group. I think the best entrepreneurs and the best business owners look at the risk profile of the decisions that they're making, and they try to make asymmetrically positive decisions like all along the way. And so oftentimes I feel like we forget about the risk of a decision. And there's more to unpack there, because I actually think taking highly risky decisions and then having it work out is a weird cultural thing too, because then how do you train people to do that? Because it's a very hard thing to take high risk decisions and be right enough, because it creates a lot of volatility. But it goes back to my comment about like the most important thing in founders, which is just this ability to persevere through, right? Survival is just part of the game. And most people just give up before they get their timing right, before they get the right insight with the customer, before they get the right product in the market. And life can change quickly in tech. You can go from being a dog to being a hero in like a very short period of time, but you're on this very, very long journey, but you have to survive for that condition to be met. And so then the question is like, when you're in a hype cycle, I would argue that we are right now, everyone wants to go for it and then go for it more and then go for it more and go for it more. And you don't realize like, guys, all of our customers are going to be around in 5 years. Like, they just want us to solve their problems. Like, we have to be around to solve their problem for them. And so survival is a precursor to that. So let's not put ourselves in a position that could potentially like compromise the enterprise along the way. Doesn't mean don't take risks, but think about how you calculate it.
I love how clear it is that this lesson and many of the lessons along these lines have come from just failure and things not working out and things breaking, which is the best.
Yeah, you ever get on the other side of a high reward, high risk decision? It is so painful because you are just cooked. You are done, and often there's no way out.
Is there a story along those lines that comes to mind, or an example of that?
Well, this is where this is where it knits together on like why I try to be so like, I think you can spend a little bit of time thinking up front to save yourself a lot of pain downstream. I had this business, not worth detailing it, but after the bubble burst in 2001, I'm like, I'm going to self-fund a business. I'm going to build a profitable business. I want to prove that I can do this. And we had started Scour, which had all the things we talked about. And so what I did is I'm like, I was a golfer, and frankly, there was nothing to do in tech. So I started selling used golf clubs on the internet, and I was making real money. And I might have learned more from this business than any other, because I started on eBay, and like I was 22 and I didn't really understand that like my margins would come down because anyone can do this, but I was one of the first ones to do it. So I was making a ton of money, and then I built this business, and then I just failed to recognize I had a lot of hubris. I was like, oh, if I could just buy all the used golf clubs in America, I can be the market maker for prices. And don't people do that?
That's great.
Yeah. And it's just like, it's madness to actually think about the practicality of that. And so I just didn't spend the time thinking. And then I ended up in this business. The business was profitable. It got to a couple million of revenue, whatever, paid me a dividend for a while, but it was painful the entire way.
I love the spectrum of experiences you've had. You've sold golf clubs. You're helping achieve AGI, you could say. There's also a whole business part of your career we haven't talked about, where you built tasers and body cams and drones and all these things. Also peer-to-peer file sharing before anyone else. final topic I just want to spend a little time on based on this experience is hiring and building teams. Something that I know you have a really strong take on that I've been hearing a lot on this podcast recently is this idea of it's more important to build the right team than find the most optimal top talent. Talk about that, why that's so interesting and important.
As of late, I've developed a more nuanced view of this, which is for certain roles, you absolutely need the right experience in this current market. You see this with researchers, right? Because the market's moving so fast, you don't have time to train up some people. So you actually have to go find people either who have the right relationships with customers that you want to get, or you have to, who might not check other boxes, but are awesome at that, might not check the classic boxes that I think you're referencing of they're a problem solver, they can grow with the company, they have a high trajectory, et cetera. I would say that that's 5% of the roles in the company, but very important whenever speed to market is important. And then for interviewing, I just interview for 3 things, and I have to interview across all kinds of expertises, which is hard. I can't be an expert in everything. And so I reduce it down to just 3 things, which is are you a curious problem solver? And can you articulate that verbally? Can you work across people? Are you humble enough to work across? And are you a good leader? And if you just do those 3 things, I think you have a pretty high chance of success, at least in an organization that I'm running. Because the world's changing, right? So you do need people that are adaptable. So all the experience is not necessarily one-to-one relevant. And then the working across to your team point, this actually came up at Uber Eats. So when I was building the Uber Eats management team, I'm not sure if this was mentioned to you from that group, but whenever I would hire people, I was trying to compose almost like an organism of strengths, and then minimize the conflicts. That management team, for the most part, outside of some of the operations side, but for the most part, that management team was the same management team from day one when we had nothing to $20 billion. And I just believed that the team knowing each other's strengths and weaknesses and being able to compensate for each other was more important than the classic advice you get around well, that person hasn't seen this much scale. And you're well, yeah, but can they learn it? I learned it. So you do have to kind of believe in people a little bit, which is my job, not necessarily their job. And so, these are people systems. They're not straightforward rules-based things you can apply.
And I especially love this advice because there's all this talk about what skills will matter in this world of AI doing all our jobs. And it feels like these 3 buckets are maybe the same thing. Just, are they good at solving problems? Are they good leaders? Can they collaborate well with other people?
Yeah, I don't think that the core rise of humanity, it will change. And I think that these things are pretty core to how humans have been successful for a long time.
Speaking of that, I'm going to take us to a recurring segment on this podcast that I call AI Corner, where I ask folks this question: what's some way that you've found a use for AI in your day-to-day life, in your work, that makes you more effective, get more done, get better stuff done?
Honestly, when I came into scale, so my history was in consumer, and I'd done some application level stuff with government, and this space is moving so quickly. AI is my, I use it as a tutor. As these new concepts come up, I have a lot of people in the company who can educate me on the nuances of the technicals of all of, the technical nature of the data and the products, but they only have so much time. And honestly, there's new concepts coming up all the time, and I need to stay on top of it. So it might sound crazy, but a large percentage of my job is not dealing with the engineering issues related to AI. I'm managing an organization, but I love understanding it. It's one of the most enjoyable, rewarding parts of my job is to learn from all these AI researchers, but they don't always have the time to do it. So I use it as a tutor. I turn on voice mode and talk to it on my way into work. So I think that's probably the most impactful thing that I use it for, that's also relevant to this topic.
I do exactly the same thing, especially when I'm prepping for these podcasts. What exactly is this? I think about when you say this. I did an interview with the founders of Perplexity a few years ago, asking about how they worked at Perplexity. And the founder said that before they ask a question of anyone on the team, they have to ask AI first. And I was just that's crazy. Now it's so obvious. But back then I was that's an insane way of working. I've never heard of this before. Just a sign of how ahead of the curve they were.
Yeah, I think number 2 would be I'll take the internal documents and I'll ask, what's the most important thing in this document? And I'm shocked. And then I'll read it and just double check. But I'm shocked at how good it is at just pulling out. There's so much in organizations that is like, I don't know what you want me to say, and I don't know what I need to know. But like, we each have our own agendas. And so this matching and so then there's like this huge broadcast problem where it's like, of all of the information you might want to receive, like what's actually important to you. And so I use it a lot for that too.
Amazing. That's a really good tip. I use it for legal documents, just like, what should I know about what they're trying to do here for me or against me? Jason, is there anything else you wanted to share or leave listeners with, maybe double down on a point before we get to our very exciting lightning round?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the really important, the reason why I'm doing this, the reason why, want to spend time here outside of wanting to be on the show for a while and, being a long-term listener or long-time listener, excuse me, is, there's a lot of amazing work going on at scale. The teams are working super hard. We're delivering a ton of value for our customers. The public narrative has not represented the work that the people here are doing and the work that our customers are doing with what we're doing for them. And I just think that deserves the respect and reward that all those people are putting in. And, we'd like people to know that.
I appreciate you saying all that. With that, we've reached our very exciting lightning round. I've got 5 questions for you. You ready?
Yeah, let's go for it.
What are 2 or 3 books that you find yourself recommending most to other people?
Something's going to sound interesting. The Selfish Gene is like one of my favorite books.
Love that book. I don't know if anyone's ever mentioned it. It was one of the most influential books for me too. So sorry, keep going.
Yes, I think Selfish Gene. Road Less Traveled, I've read more than once. Just, it's just like one of the classic human psychology book. And then I think in business, like Good to Great. It's not the read that you're going to be most excited to, enjoy on a vacation, but like it's pretty much right. And I think we should take advice from people who have analyzed these business problems before, because not a lot's changed, but we keep acting like everything's changed.
What's crazy about that book, you look at all the companies they talk about. I haven't read it in a while, but just like the whole book is about companies that last, I believe. Or maybe that's the other book. I don't know. But anyway, all the companies that they talk about, I don't know if they're still around. It's like so hard for a business to last a long, long time.
I would also recommend Thinking Slow and Fast, right? That's
Thinking Fast and Slow?
Thinking Fast and Slow, excuse me. Sorry. Yeah. It's been like a decade since I read it. But like just in terms of point there being like human biases are very important to understand.
What's really crazy to me about that book and Kahneman in general, someone asked him just, how's your life been impacted by learning all these biases humans have? He's like, not much. Like I have the same biases. Knowing them doesn't really help me avoid them.
See, I find myself checking myself. Whenever I get super convicted on something now, I will like be like, okay, what is the list of things that I'm like inclined to do to try to like catch myself? Because, I think we're most inclined to have these bad decisions impulsively, which is what I think the book is largely about. I mean, it's a long book.
So long. Oh my God. It feels like that's where AI could help us in the future. Just like, hey, Jason, have you sure this isn't framing effect or whatever?
Yes.
Okay. Next question. Do you have a favorite recent movie or TV show that you've really enjoyed?
Most of the movies I watch are with my kids. So I wish I had something deep and profound. But
no, kids content also is a very acceptable.
Yeah, the Formula One movie I thought was really good. I mean, it's a classic action movie. I don't think it informs anything in AI or business, but it's good to check out from the craziness of tech once in a while.
Is there a product you recently discovered that you really love? Could be an app, could be clothing, could be a kitchen gadget, anything along those lines?
VO3, right? Not totally new, but when I was in high school, I wanted to be a screenwriter. I actually grew up in the Bay Area and everybody was an engineer, but like I wanted to be a screenwriter. And so I went back and I got the first page of one of my old scripts, which not good scripts, but like, I got the first page. I took a picture of the script and I fed it to VO3 and I said, make this scene. And it got it right.
Wow.
I was shocked. I was just like absolutely shocked that you could just take a picture of a script. And so now I'm thinking about that for like, how do I use these tools for like family videos, like, some of the grok tools now with like, live, making live images more active, I think are like really interesting. Like, I think they need one more step of iteration, but I think those are going to be really like emotionally life-changing for people because just like a little bit of movement in an image from a grandparent or a relative or whatever you haven't seen in a while, it really does make a big emotional impact on you.
I love that when you play with these tools, you probably can think about, oh, here's like the people that helped train this thing. Here's the people that helped unbox the problem that I had.
I was actually talking to someone who was working on VO3, and I told him the script thing, and he goes, oh, actually scripts. Yeah, no, like the way the data is formatted in a script, that would actually be very good because, they start with like, set looks dark, interior, this character says it in this raspy voice. And so it gives you all the instructions in the script.
Oh man, just unlocked a whole new business unit right there.
Yeah.
Okay, 2 more questions. One is, do you have a favorite life motto that you often think about, find useful in work or in life?
Yeah. The end is never the end. That's like my favorite, like internal saying. And it goes to the comments before about surviving being a precursor to thriving. You got to survive before you thrive, which is your brain tells you, and along these entrepreneurial journeys, I think this is most applicable. This is the hardest journey anyone can go on. Like if you go on this journey for 5 years, like you are mentally harder than like 99.9% of the population. This is like, people don't understand the Chinese water torture of like having self-doubt and like having things go wrong, et cetera. And so, more tactically, you get this when you're working out and, like in a day, like, oh, I'm too tired. Like I need to stop. But the truth is you can keep going. And the world's going to keep spinning. So I find in the moments where it's just like the hardest, or you have this hard decision that seems impassable, and your body, you're having this visceral reaction to like, this is impassable. Just to remind yourself that like, I'm going to wake up tomorrow. Like this isn't the end. There's another end somewhere. I just find that to unlock me to be like, okay, there might not be a perfect solution. There might be like an imperfect solution, but it's a solution. So let's just keep going.
Final question. You helped create Uber Eats. I imagine you're still a power user of Uber Eats. You have a favorite restaurant on Uber Eats that maybe people should know about, maybe that you order most from?
I order a shocking amount of McDonald's, actually, despite my like original story. It's sort of the family treat in the house. I would say that's probably the top thing that we order.
Oh man, I'm worried for your health, but I haven't had McDonald's so long. This is like, maybe I should give it another try.
I mean, more practically, we will order like mixed greens or tender greens or something like that, like on a day-to-day basis. But like, I think that like the more notable, surprising thing is that despite my initial aversion to working with a global chain, like it's a good treat once in a while. You just shouldn't have it all the time.
Jason, this was incredible. I really appreciate you making time for this. I'm really honored to be the first chat you've had since taking over at Scale. Where can folks find you online if they want to maybe reach out, learn more about what you're, I don't know, maybe look for, maybe join Scale? Where do you want to point people to? And how can listeners be useful to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm at JDroege, JDROEGE on X. That's probably the easiest way to follow me, keep up with things. And, you can shoot me a DM if you like. And so I think that's how you would keep in touch. And sorry, what was your other question? Sorry.
If you're hiring, I don't know, where should people go check it out if you are? And then also
absolutely. Just go to scale.com, go to our careers page, and we have 250 open roles to the point about, we're in business and we're growing. We're hiring a ton of people. Our applications business, our data business is growing. Our applications and services business is growing like crazy. And so we're going to need a lot of people to help us on that journey.
You guys just signed some insanely large contracts with the government, I was reading.
2 $100 million contracts.
$100 million contracts.
Yeah, we didn't sign just one. We signed 2 in 1 month.
Oh,
so
Jesus.
Yes, no, our federal business is doing well. Our enterprise business is doing well. Our international government's business is doing well. There's a lot of demand out there.
Some salespeople are getting some great commissions. Good job, them. Jason, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Honored to be a guest here. Super excited to be with you, especially so early in the journey, or at least my journey here, leading Scale.
Appreciate it. Thanks for coming. Thanks for joining us. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this valuable, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Also, please consider giving us a rating or leaving a review, as that really helps other listeners find the podcast. You can find all past episodes or learn more about the show at lennyspodcast.com. See you in the next episode.